I never thought my life would take such a twisted turn, just days before my wedding. But there I was, sitting across from my adoptive mother, Victoria, as she shattered everything I believed about our relationship. If you love me, if you truly appreciate everything I've done for you, you'll cancel this wedding and convince Lucas to marry Emily instead. My heart slammed against my ribs. What? I breathed, unable to believe what I'd just heard. Victoria sat back, folding her arms as if she had just asked me to pick up groceries. Emily has had a harder life than you. She deserves happiness too. You should want this for her. A chill spread through me. Emily was Victoria's biological daughter. She had been in a wheelchair since childhood due to a neurological condition. We had grown up together, and I had always considered her my sister. But this was insane. Are you seriously telling me to hand over my fiancé? My voice wavered between disbelief and anger. Victoria sighed like I was a stubborn child. Elena, you owe me this. I took you in when no one else would. I gave you a home, a future. Now I need you to do this for Emily. I felt like the ground beneath me was cracking. Victoria had always been my savior. When my biological mother's neglect had nearly cost me my life, my father fought for custody. But when he passed away, Victoria, his second wife, stepped in and raised me. I had always believed she did it out of love, but now it felt like a debt she expected me to repay. I owe you? I repeated, my voice hollow. Yes, she said, her gaze unwavering. Lucas has always been kind to Emily. He cares about her. I let out a sharp laugh, though nothing about this was funny. Not like that. He loves me. He asked me to marry him. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. Emily needs someone who will always be there for her. Do you really think a man like Lucas will turn his back on her if you step aside? I felt sick. My stomach churned, and my head spun. Does Emily even know you're asking me to do this? Victoria hesitated, and that pause told me everything. You haven't told her, I whispered. She looked away. I know what's best for my daughter. A sharp pain twisted in my chest. All these years, I thought we were a family. But to her, I was just an outsider who had been given too much. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. I'm not doing this. Victoria's eyes darkened. You'll regret this, Elena. I turned and walked out, my hands shaking. My wedding was just days away, and suddenly, the people I thought were my family felt like strangers. I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. I barely remember driving home that night. My mind was a storm, thoughts crashing into each other, unable to settle. Victoria's words echoed in my head. You owe me. You'll regret this. How had things come to this? The moment I stepped into my apartment, my phone buzzed. Lucas. I hesitated before answering, my voice unsteady. Hey, are you okay? His concern wrapped around me like a safety net. I've been waiting to hear from you. I let out a shaky breath. Can you come over? 15 minutes later, Lucas walked through my door, his brow furrowed as he took in my expression. What happened? I told him everything. Every twisted word Victoria had said, every expectation she had placed on me. I watched his face shift from confusion to disbelief, then finally to anger. She asked you to break up with me? For Emily? His voice was sharp, incredulous. I nodded, my hands clenched in my lap. She thinks you should marry her instead. Lucas let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. That's insane. I care about Emily, but not like that. And she knows it. Apparently, Victoria thinks she deserves you more than I do. My voice cracked, and suddenly, all the emotions I had been holding back crashed over me. She actually thinks I owe her this, Lucas. He crouched in front of me, taking my hands. You don't owe her anything, Elena. She raised you because she chose to. That's what parents do. I wanted to believe that, but Victoria's words had planted a seed of doubt deep inside me. Lucas cupped my face, forcing me to meet his gaze. Listen to me. I love you. I asked you to marry me. Nothing and no one is going to change that. Tears burned my eyes. Then why does it feel like I'm about to lose everything? He pulled me into his arms, holding me close. Because Victoria wants control, and she's losing it. I closed my eyes, trying to absorb his warmth, his reassurance. But a sinking feeling in my gut told me this wasn't over. The next morning, I woke up to missed calls from Victoria. I ignored them. Then Emily called. I hesitated before answering. Hey, can we talk? Her voice was quiet, hesitant. I sighed. Emily, if this is about what Victoria... I didn't know, she interrupted. I swear I had no idea she said that to you. I hesitated, my anger wavering. You didn't? No. She just told me you were being selfish, that you were trying to cut us out of your life. I exhaled slowly, rubbing my temples. Of course, Victoria had spun the story in her favor. Emily, I love you, but you have to understand, this is my life. Lucas is my fiancé. I know, she whispered, and I never wanted this. I never wanted you to give up your happiness for me. Relief flooded through me. Then tell Victoria that. I tried, she said bitterly. She won't listen. She's convinced she knows what's best for me. I closed my eyes. What are we supposed to do then? Emily hesitated. I don't know, but I don't want to lose you over this. Neither did I. But Victoria wasn't going to back down easily. The first real sign that she wasn't done came later that afternoon. Lucas and I were finalizing details for the wedding when a notification popped up on my phone. A new post on Facebook from Victoria. My heart sank as I read it. Family is about love, but sometimes people forget where they came from. It's heartbreaking when someone turns their back on the ones who raised them, choosing selfishness over gratitude. I never imagined my own daughter would betray us like this. My stomach dropped. I scrolled through the comments, sympathetic messages from distant relatives, old family friends, people who had no idea what was actually happening. She's trying to turn everyone against me, I whispered. Lucas read over my shoulder, his expression dark. We need to say something. I shook my head. No, that's what she wants, a public fight. But if you don't say anything, she controls the narrative. He was right, but I wasn't sure I was ready for that battle. Before I could decide, another message came through. This time, a text from my dad. We need to talk, now. My pulse spiked. My father had always been quiet, always letting Victoria take the lead in family matters. But if he was reaching out, it meant things were spiraling even faster than I'd thought. I swallowed hard. I need to go see him. Lucas grabbed my hand. I'm coming with you. I nodded. I wasn't facing this alone, not anymore. But as we drove to my parents' house, a gnawing fear settled deep in my chest. Victoria wasn't just trying to guilt me into submission. She was declaring war. The drive to my parents' house felt like a slow march toward battle. Lucas held my hand the entire time, his grip firm, steady. I focused on the feel of his skin against mine, trying to ground myself, trying to push away the nausea that came with knowing what was waiting for me. Victoria had already drawn her battle lines. Now, I had to face my father and find out where he stood. When we arrived, the house was quiet, but tension hung in the air like a thick fog. My father was sitting in the living room, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Victoria stood nearby, silent, but clearly in control of the conversation. Emily was nowhere to be seen. Sit, my father said. His voice was calm, but something about it put me on edge. Lucas and I sat across from him. My heart pounded in my chest. You know why you're here, he said. I swallowed hard. Because Victoria is twisting the truth and making me look like the villain. His jaw tightened. She told me what happened. She told me you disrespected her, that you screamed at her, called her a terrible mother, and said Emily wasn't your family. I sucked in a sharp breath. That's not what happened. Victoria finally spoke, her voice dripping with pain. Elena, why would I lie? I raised you. I loved you like my own. Why would you turn on me now? Her performance was flawless. I almost wanted to believe her myself. Lucas leaned forward, his tone clipped. Victoria, let's not pretend here. You asked Elena to give me up to push me toward Emily instead. You wanted to trade one daughter's happiness for another's. My father's expression flickered with uncertainty, but Victoria shook her head, playing the victim. That's not true. Lucas pulled out his phone. Elena recorded part of the conversation. That was a lie, but Victoria didn't know that. Her face paled slightly. My father turned to her. Did you really say that? She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. I took a deep breath. Dad, I never disrespected her. I never said Emily wasn't my family. I love her, but I won't let Victoria manipulate me into throwing away my life for something I never agreed to. My father's shoulders sagged. He suddenly looked much older, much more exhausted. Victoria, he said slowly, did you really ask her to leave Lucas? Silence. Then, I only wanted what was best for Emily, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. A heavy weight pressed against my chest. I had expected her to deny it, until the very end. The fact that she admitted it, even in such a twisted way, meant she knew she had lost. My father exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. You put Elena in an impossible position. She owes me. Victoria snapped, suddenly shifting back to anger. I raised her. I gave her everything. And this is how she repays me. My heart shattered. You didn't raise me to collect a debt. Her eyes burned with fury. Then maybe I shouldn't have raised you at all. The words cut through me like a blade. I felt Lucas stiffen beside me. My father looked like he had been slapped. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Victoria's expression flickered like she realized she had gone too far, but she didn't take it back. She just stood there, seething. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. I guess that's how you really feel, then. I stood up. Lucas followed. My father didn't stop us. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. Emily doesn't deserve this. I hope one day she sees through it. Victoria said nothing. My father just sat there, staring at the floor. And with that, I walked away. The moment we got back to my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, my body trembling with the weight of everything that had just happened. Lucas knelt beside me. I'm so sorry. I shook my head. It's not your fault. She had no right to say that to you. I pressed my fingers against my temples. I don't think I ever really knew her. I thought I did, but my voice cracked. She doesn't love me, does she? Lucas took my hands in his. She loves control, and she can't control you anymore. Tears slipped down my cheeks. What do I do now? He wiped them away gently. We get married. We live our lives. We move forward. I wanted to believe it was that simple. But a sinking feeling told me Victoria wasn't done yet. 2 days passed with no word from her. No texts, no calls, and then another Facebook post. It's devastating when a child chooses greed over family. We gave her everything, and she threw us away like we were nothing. My stomach twisted as I read through the comments. People offering sympathy, some calling me ungrateful. I clenched my fists. She won't stop. Lucas frowned. She's trying to turn people against you. I was done playing defense. I took a deep breath and opened my own social media. My hands shook, but my resolve was solid. I typed, "It's painful when the people you trust the most turn their love into a transaction." I was raised by someone who believed I owed her my future. But love isn't a debt to be paid. I will not be manipulated, and I will not apologize for choosing my happiness. I hit post before I could second-guess myself. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing with messages. Some were supportive, others were filled with accusations. But I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I had taken control. And no matter what Victoria did next, I wasn't backing down. I expected backlash after my post, but I wasn't prepared for the firestorm that followed. My phone buzzed nonstop messages from distant relatives, old family friends, and even a few acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were supportive. You don't owe anyone your happiness. Stay strong. Others were less kind. How could you betray the woman who raised you? But the worst messages came from my father. You're making a mistake, Elena. Take the post down and come home so we can fix this. This is family. We don't air our dirty laundry like this. And the last one, the one that shattered any lingering hope I had, if you go through with this wedding, don't bother coming back. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I had always known my father let Victoria take the lead, but a part of me had hoped he would see the truth, that he would stand by me, but he had made his choice. Lucas sat beside me, his hand resting on my knee. I know this hurts. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. She won. He frowned. What? She got exactly what she wanted. She turned my own father against me. Lucas shook his head. No, he made that choice. And someday he's going to regret it. I wanted to believe that. But at that moment, all I felt was loss. The wedding was in 3 days. I tried to focus on the final details, the dress, the venue, the seating arrangements, but my mind kept drifting back to my father's words. Lucas and I had agreed to keep things small after the fallout with Victoria. Some of my family had backed out, but my grandmother, my biological mother's mother, had been my rock through all of this. She called me every day, reminding me that I wasn't alone. On the night before the wedding, she arrived at my apartment with a knowing smile. You're thinking about your father. I sighed. I know I should be excited, but I keep wondering if he'll change his mind. She set a warm hand on mine. If he does, it will be on his time, not yours. You can't put your life on hold waiting for people to come around. She was right. I had spent my whole life trying to be what Victoria wanted, trying to be worthy of my place in that family. I was done waiting. The day of the wedding arrived. Lucas and I had chosen a beautiful garden venue. Nothing extravagant, just a peaceful place where we could celebrate with the people who truly loved us. His family was there, my grandmother, a few close friends. But as I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my veil, I felt the ache of my father's absence. A soft knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. My grandmother peeked in. "There's someone here to see you." My heart pounded. "Who?" She hesitated. "Emily." A mix of emotions surged through me. Part of me wanted to send her away, to shut the door on everything that had led to this moment. But another part of me, the part that had grown up loving her as my sister, needed to hear what she had to say. I nodded. "Let her in." Emily rolled in, her hands folded in her lap, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. "Hey." I crossed my arms. "What are you doing here?" She sighed. "I had to come. I had to say I'm sorry. I wasn't expecting that." She swallowed hard. "I know what Mom did. I know what she said to you. And I know she's the reason Dad turned against you." I leaned against the vanity, my emotions swirling. "And you still defended her." Emily winced. "I didn't know what else to do. She's my mother. She made me feel like if I didn't take her side, I'd lose everything." I understood that feeling too well. She looked up at me, eyes filled with guilt. "But I don't want to lose you." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Then why are you still letting her control you?" She exhaled shakily. "Because I'm scared. Because I don't know how to stand up to her the way you do." I softened. For all her faults, Emily had been raised under Victoria's suffocating grip, just like me. The only difference was she had never known anything else. I walked over and took her hands. "You don't have to live under her shadow forever." Her lips trembled. "Do you think Dad will ever come around?" I wanted to tell her yes, that one day he would see the truth, that he would realize Victoria's love had always come with conditions, but I didn't know if that was true. So instead, I squeezed her hands and said, "I hope so." Emily wiped at her eyes. "I know I don't deserve to be here, but I really do hope you're happy, Elena." I smiled, the first genuine one in days. "I am." And for the first time, I truly meant it. The wedding was perfect. Lucas and I said our vows surrounded by people who actually loved us, who wanted us to be happy. As we danced under the warm glow of the evening lights, I let go of all the anger, the hurt, the disappointment. Victoria had lost, not because I had fought her, but because I had chosen to walk away. As the night wound down, I caught my grandmother watching me with a proud smile. "What?" I asked, laughing. She reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "You finally see it now, don't you?" I tilted my head. "See what?" She brushed a loose strand of hair behind my ear, her voice warm with love. "That you were never the one who needed to prove anything to them. They were the ones who needed to prove they deserved you." Tears welled in my eyes, but this time, they weren't from pain. They were from relief, from freedom. And as I looked around at the people who had chosen to stand by me, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. The morning after the wedding, I woke up wrapped in Lucas's arms, sunlight spilling through the curtains. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of peace. No more last-minute wedding stress, no more waiting for the next blow from Victoria. Just me, Lucas, and the quiet certainty that I had made the right choice. But peace never lasts long when it comes to Victoria. I was still curled up against Lucas when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but something told me to check. It was a message from my father. "We need to talk." I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. Lucas stirred beside me, his voice groggy. "Everything okay?" I swallowed. "My dad wants to talk." Lucas propped himself up on one elbow, studying my expression. "Do you want to?" That was the real question, wasn't it? After everything, after the betrayal, the accusations, the way he had turned his back on me, was I ready to hear what he had to say? I exhaled slowly. "I think I need to." We met at a quiet cafe in town, away from the house where everything had fallen apart. My father looked different. Not physically, he was still the same broad-shouldered man with graying hair, but there was something in his eyes, a heaviness. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then he let out a long breath. "You look good." I folded my hands on the table. "Thanks." Silence stretched between us, thick and awkward. Then he ran a hand through his hair. "I saw the pictures from your wedding." A lump formed in my throat. "You should have been there." He sighed, staring down at his coffee. I know. I waited, hoping he would say more, hoping he would finally admit he had been wrong. But when he looked up at me, there was still hesitation in his eyes. I never wanted to choose sides, he said carefully. My stomach twisted. But you did. He flinched. Victoria manipulated you, I interrupted. She lied to you. She twisted everything so you would turn against me. And you let her. He didn't argue. He just sat there, looking tired. I thought I was doing the right thing, keeping the family together. I let out a bitter laugh. And where did that get you? His jaw clenched. I lost my daughter. Those words should have brought relief, but they only made my chest ache. Because despite everything, I'd wanted my father to fight for me, to see the truth on his own. I shook my head. No, Dad. You didn't lose me. You chose Victoria over me. He looked away, guilt flickering across his face. She's my wife, and I'm your daughter. My voice was quieter now, but no less firm. Or did that not matter? His shoulders sagged. Of course it mattered. Then why am I the only one sitting here? I asked. Where's Victoria? He hesitated, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in his loyalty. She's struggling, he admitted. Emily barely talks to her anymore. Ever since your wedding, things have been tense. That caught me off guard. Emily? He nodded. She moved out last week. Said she needed space. I sat back, trying to process this. Emily had been under Victoria's control for so long, and now she was pulling away. Maybe there was hope for her after all. My father sighed. I don't know what to do anymore, Elena. And there it was. The moment I had been waiting for. The realization that he had made the wrong choice. That he had allowed Victoria to push him into a corner. But I couldn't fix this for him. I took a deep breath. You need to decide what matters to you, Dad, because I can't be the one fighting for this relationship anymore. His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read, regret maybe. Or maybe it was just too late. I want to fix this, he said. I nodded, but I didn't say me too. Because I wasn't sure if I still believed that. That night, I told Lucas everything. He listened quietly as I explained what my father had said, what Emily had done, how Victoria was finally facing the consequences of her own actions. When I finished, he wrapped his arms around me. How do you feel? I rested my head against his chest, exhaling slowly. I don't know, because I didn't. Part of me was relieved that my father was finally seeing the cracks in Victoria's story, but another part of me knew that even if he wanted to fix things, some damage couldn't be undone. Lucas kissed the top of my head. Whatever happens next, you don't have to face it alone. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed that. A week later, I got another message from Emily. Can we meet? I hesitated. The last time we had talked, it had been emotional, raw. I wasn't sure if I was ready to open that door again, but something in me told me to say yes. We met at a small park, the autumn air crisp around us. Emily looked different, lighter, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She gave me a small smile. Hey. She shifted, fidgeting with the sleeves of her sweater. I moved out, she said after a moment. I heard. She nodded. I needed to get away, to think for myself. I studied her, trying to gauge if she really meant it. And what do you think now? She met my eyes. That mom was wrong. A lump formed in my throat. Emily sighed. She's still trying to pretend she didn't do anything wrong. Still acting like she's the victim. That didn't surprise me. Victoria was never going to admit she had lost. But I don't want to be like her, Emily continued. I don't want to spend my life resenting people for things they can't control. I exhaled, tension slowly leaving my body. So where do we go from here? She swallowed. I want my sister back. Tears burned at the edges of my vision, but I held them in. Then let's start there. Emily nodded, a small smile breaking through. Okay. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, things could heal. In the weeks that followed, I felt the weight of everything slowly begin to lift. It wasn't immediate healing, never is, but for the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for Victoria's next move. She had lost, and she knew it. The Facebook posts stopped. The guilt-tripping texts faded away. It was as if, after realizing she no longer had control over me, she simply let go. Or maybe she was just biding her time. With Victoria, it was hard to tell. Emily and I met regularly, rebuilding something that had once felt beyond repair. She was still living on her own, still navigating life outside of Victoria's influence. But I could see the difference in her. She was learning to think for herself. I didn't realize how much of my life she controlled, she admitted one afternoon over coffee. It's weird, making decisions without waiting for her approval. I smiled. It gets easier. She hesitated, stirring her drink. Do you think Dad will ever wake up? That was the question, wasn't it? My father had always let Victoria lead, let her shape his reality. But now that Emily was pulling away too, how long would he keep pretending everything was fine? I don't know, I admitted. But that's his battle, not ours. Emily nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess it is. A month passed. Then two. Lucas and I settled into married life, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. There were no expectations weighing me down, no silent obligations hanging over my head. Then, just when I had started to believe the past was behind me, my father showed up at my door. I froze when I saw him standing there, looking older, thinner, more exhausted than I had ever seen him. Dad, I breathed. He gave me a small, hesitant smile. Hey, kiddo. Lucas appeared beside me, his hand instinctively resting on my lower back. Should I stay? He asked softly. I shook my head. I'll be okay. Lucas kissed my temple before disappearing into the living room. I turned back to my father, arms crossed. Why are you here? He let out a heavy sigh. Can we talk? I studied him for a moment before stepping aside. 5 minutes. He walked in slowly, looking around as if he barely recognized the place. Or maybe he barely recognized me. I sat down on the couch, and he took the chair across from me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, he finally broke the silence. Emily told me you've been seeing each other. I nodded. She's making her own choices now. A flicker of pain crossed his face. Yeah, I guess she is. I watched him carefully. He looked tired, lost. She's not cutting you out, I said, softer now. But she's done being controlled. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. I didn't come here to talk about Emily. I raised an eyebrow. Then why are you here? He rubbed a hand over his face. I messed up, Elena. I blinked. I hadn't expected him to admit that so easily. I let Victoria dictate too much, he continued. I let her turn me against you. I see that now. Anger and relief warred inside me. I had waited so long to hear those words, but now that they were here, they didn't erase everything that had happened. I exhaled slowly. And what made you realize that? He hesitated. She's been different since Emily left. More bitter, more resentful. And she blames you for it, I scoffed. Of course she does. She told me she never should have taken you in. His voice was quiet, almost ashamed. A sharp pain stabbed through my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. And you still stayed? His hands tightened into fists. At first, I thought she was just upset, that she didn't mean it. But the more she talked, the more I realized. She never saw you as her daughter. Not really. I swallowed hard, refusing to let his words break me. It took you this long to figure that out? His face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Regret. I was a coward, he admitted. I should have stood up for you. I should have seen it sooner. And I hate myself for not doing that. I stared at him, searching for any sign of manipulation, any hint that this was just another attempt to reel me back in. But all I saw was a man who had lost everything because he had been too afraid to fight for the people who mattered most. Dad, I hesitated. I don't know if we can ever go back to how things were. He nodded slowly. I know, but I want to try. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting his words settle. I had spent so much time mourning the father I thought I had lost. But maybe, just maybe, he was finally waking up. I'm not ready yet, I admitted. But maybe, one day. A small, sad smile crossed his lips. That's more than I deserve. I stood up, signaling that our conversation was over. He followed suit. At the door, he paused. I'm proud of you, you know, for standing your ground. My throat tightened. I know. And for the first time, I really believed it. A few weeks later, I got a text from Emily. Mom's furious. She told Dad to choose between her and you. He left. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Left where? I typed back. I don't know. He just packed a bag and walked out. I sat down, the weight of it all hitting me at once. Victoria had finally backed my father into a corner, and this time, he had made the right choice. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if my father and I would ever fully repair the damage, or if Emily would completely break free from Victoria's influence. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what came next, because this time I was writing my own story. And that, I realized, was the greatest freedom of all. Story 2. Although my wife said she was pregnant, I am infertile. Before telling her the truth, I played along with her infidelity for months. I am a 38-year-old man who married my 33-year-old wife 2 years ago. After 3 years of dating, she was more interested in getting married than I was, but I agreed to it only to please her. We began attempting to conceive once more around a year ago. My wife was the one who insisted on that. When we were attempting to get pregnant, we had a lot of difficulties. My mental health had gotten so poor that I made the decision to get examined. I attempted to deal with my wife's nasty conduct amid our infertility struggles, but it was simply too much to handle. The physicians informed me that I was sterile a few days following the test. That essentially destroyed my heart, to be honest, despite the fact that I didn't want a child. I had already begun to imagine my life as a parent, and I sincerely hoped to become one. Therefore, the most heartbreaking news I could get at the moment was that I would never be able to become a father. However, the worst was still to come. I had been attempting to get the bravery to inform my wife that I was the cause of our infertility, but I was worried about her reaction. She had already treated me so cruelly that I couldn't even think how she would feel if she realized that she was unlikely to get what she wanted from me. I thus held off on telling my wife the results of my tests for a few days. However, it was she who ultimately surprised me. She sat me down and informed me that she had some very important news to share with me 4 days after I found out I was infertile. I was so terrified that I assumed she had somehow discovered my infertility. However, she wanted to inform me that she was at last expecting a child. Fortunately, she was blissfully oblivious of my genuine sentiments and started to rejoice very immediately, even though I was completely surprised by what she was saying. I attempted to share in her joy so she wouldn't question me or anything, but the very following day I underwent another test to be sure I was really sterile. I got the same results once more. My wife was definitely cheating on me if I wasn't the father. Therefore, I was at a loss. She required expensive medical treatments to conceive artificially, and as I was the only one who made money, she couldn't have gotten anything done without first requesting that kind of money from me. Thus, it was clear that she was cheating. I did nothing since the concept itself was so strange and awful. Over the course of the following several days, my wife organized a lavish celebration to reveal her pregnancy. I was just as broken as she appeared to be, but I had to find out the truth about this whole thing, so I couldn't let it show on my face. This was too private and awkward to be discussed with anybody, so I kept everything under wraps and didn't even inform my own family about what was going on. First of all, far too much time had gone by for me to even express my thoughts to my wife. Second, I wanted to know the precise identity of her child's father, because I feared that if I confronted her, she may simply leave, and I would never find out. Fortunately, I learned about it on the actual day of the celebration. Many people came, including some of my coworkers, our families, and our friends. One of our neighbors who lived just across the street was also invited by her. Our 27-year-old neighbor is a young man who is unquestionably far more attractive than I am. Since he is a model, he is undoubtedly more attractive than other individuals, but he is still working to establish himself in the industry. Since his own family lives so far away, he moved in with his aunt, who owns the home where he resides, in order to be nearer to the city. When he first moved in, my wife would prepare meals for him and his aunt since she had always had a soft spot for him. On a few occasions, he has even joined us for dinner, during which we have discussed his job. In addition to being well-read and articulate, he majored in literature like my wife, so they clicked right away when they first met. Since he appeared like a decent person and I trusted my wife, I never had anything against him. However, I could see that something had changed when he came inside on the day of our celebration, since my wife's eyes brightened. As soon as he entered, she immediately went for him, and they had a lengthier embrace than she had given any of the previous visitors. I could see they were working on something, but I needed a means to verify it. No one else appeared to notice this, but I did. I chose to excuse myself in order to go to the restroom, but instead I went to the bedroom and opened my wife's laptop. She had been asleep when I checked her phone. She informed me she was pregnant a few days later, but I hadn't noticed anything fishy. It had become a little more challenging to use her laptop because she was always watching or typing on it when I was at home. I would often ask her what she was doing. I really believed that she was working on a novel, so I respected her privacy when she pulled the screen away from me and told me that she had been working on it for months. Now that things had changed, I was quite certain that there was no novel, and that it was only a pretext to keep her laptop's contents hidden from me. Fortunately, I had simple access to everything and there was no password. I was able to locate another email account after some research, not to mention her own. I changed to that one and read through all of the sent and received emails. I read through those communications, and both my wife and the other person confessed their love for one another, our neighbor, since he was using his own name, and she was informing him of her pregnancy in the more recent emails. I was able to identify the email address. He was angry about it and didn't take it well. He probably wanted to terminate things, which is why the mail stopped for a bit, but my wife wouldn't allow him. After a while, I received the most awful email of all, in which she informed him that she had contacted a legal acquaintance who would assist her in filing for divorce as soon as the baby was delivered. She had even attempted to persuade me to become pregnant with her in order to receive both child support and alimony following the divorce. This would allow her to move in with our neighbor a few months later and lead a happy life. When I read it, I was appalled, and every time I think about that email, I still get sick to my stomach. In any case, I immediately pushed whatever emotion I was experiencing aside and resumed my job. Before turning off my phone and putting the email back where I had discovered it, I snapped a few photos of it. I was more repulsed by what my wife was attempting to accomplish than I was by the infidelity. It was one thing to cheat, but it was beyond insane that she tried to con me into having a kid with her and then demanded that I pay all of that money so that she could finance her ideal life with her poor lover. To top it all off, she was such a talented actor that I hadn't yet suspected anything. Even though her delight was almost unsettling, I was so furious about it all that I made the additional effort to exact my retribution. I decided to comply and then surprise her by telling her the truth when she least expected it. I couldn't allow her to get away with it without experiencing the same level of hurt, betrayal, and annoyance that I had when I discovered her dishonesty. I did what I had to do, call me a crazy. Over the following 9 months, I pretended to be the ideal husband and father. It was difficult to realize that she had been deceiving me all along. However, the more she lied and feigned happiness with me, the more determined I became to finish this. I was the finest husband anybody could ask for, made sure she took all of her vitamins on schedule, and went to all of her doctor's appointments. Finally, my wife went into labor a few days ago. Who wouldn't be in my shoes? That's why I was so anxious. However, I ignored all of it and drove her alone to the hospital. I had previously phoned her parents, but not mine since I didn't want them there in case things got out of hand. Anyway, I decided to break the news to her when we had some alone time because her parents had to drive an hour to get to the hospital. I informed her that I would walk outside and phone our neighbor so he could come get her as soon as she was safely inside the room. She said that there was no need for it, and that she didn't want a stranger in the room when she gave birth. Looking surprised and stuttering a little, I gave her a grin in return and handed her the divorce papers and the results of my fertility test. I had made sure to bring it with me on the day of her due date because I had filed for divorce only a few days prior. She read it all, still looking perplexed. So I told her that even if I had wanted to, I couldn't get her pregnant, thus the child wasn't mine. After that, I informed her of the emails I had discovered on her extremely private account. It was then that she at last understood what was happening. As I left, she struggled to find the right words, and the expression on her face was priceless. My heart was racing so quickly that I believed I might also need to remain in the hospital. When I eventually left, I contacted our neighbor to let him know that my wife was about to give birth. I hung up as quickly as I could without even waiting for his response. I then waited for my wife's family to arrive in my automobile. I left as quickly as I could when I saw her dad's car arrive into the driveway. I traveled for a bit before arriving at this motel a little outside of town, and I even switched off my phone just for peace of mind. To ensure I had everything I needed and wasn't taken off guard, I had previously packed my luggage a few weeks prior and had them stored in the back of my car. For the remainder of the day, I drank beer, watched television, and did whatever I could to distract myself. That night, knowing that I was finally finished with this entire performance, I went to sleep in peace. I eventually switched on my phone when I woke up the following morning. My wife and my neighbor sent me hundreds of SMS, of course, but I didn't even bother to open them. However, I did go through some of the texts I received from my brother and dad. When my wife was unable to reach me, I assumed she had called them, so I made the decision to give my parents another call and talk to them. They did deserve an explanation for what was going on, so I informed them that I would be returning home soon and even asked them to bring my brother along so I could give them the full rundown. My brother was already at my parents' house when I drove there, and they all appeared perplexed and a little irritated, which was understandable given that I had just missed the birth of my own child and that it also caused them to miss the birth of their grandson. However, I sat them down, told them the entire situation, and gave them my justifications for my actions. When I finished telling them, they were unable to speak. I was prepared for a barrage of inquiries and charges, but none of that materialized. My dad only expressed his hope that nothing more serious would occur, while the others remained silent if they had any more remarks. On that front, everything was laid back. That was a few days ago, and although my family hasn't spoken out much, my wife has gone to great lengths to accuse me of spoiling her first-time motherhood experience. Since I left, she's been attempting to contact me via phone and text, but I have not returned her calls. My wife was quite unhappy, and my neighbor contacted me a few hours ago to advise that we should put aside our disagreements for her sake and at least attempt to work things out with her for once. The arrogance of these folks is astounding. You're still attempting to talk to me and act as though I'm upset over some little matter. In his text, he also noted a few other things, such as how my wife had begun to fall in love with me again when she was pregnant, which had come as a shock to both of them. Therefore, I ought to at least make an effort to save our marriage. I dialed BS on it since, why was my neighbor still in the picture if she had begun to show interest in me again? Why they believe I'm so dumb is beyond me. I can't do anything to make my wife feel better. She is mostly upset that I have known everything from the start, but I still decided to remain with her and tolerate this entire situation, and she accused me of deceiving her. First update, I've been staying in a hotel room for over a week now since the kid was delivered. I haven't seen my wife yet, and I don't have any plans to do so. I've made it very obvious that I don't want to talk to her or listen to her, so I'm not sure why she keeps texting and phoning. Although I haven't banned her yet, I have blocked my neighbor since he texted me to remind me that my wife was still hopeful and wanted me to contact her again. Since they are both essentially unemployed, I am positive that the only reason he is still with her and attempting to win my forgiveness is so she will at least receive something from the divorce settlement and the alimony. My wife was a stay-at-home wife, which I admired and valued, but she did more than simply take care of the housework. In addition, she was unforgivably cheating on me behind my back. Before anyone criticizes me, I did not recommend that she resign from her position after getting married. Actually, while we were dating and she was employed, I was quite supportive of her. However, it was she who stated that she would like to resign and take care of our house. Since it was her decision, and I made enough money nonetheless, I didn't object either. As soon as we can demonstrate that she had been cheating, which I hope will be simple, my lawyer should be able to exclude me from paying alimony. Even with all of their combined income, my neighbor will find it nearly hard to pay for his personal bills, my wife's expenses, and a kid on top of that because he is still having trouble finding well-paying modeling jobs. I wish them well. I'm simply relieved that I'm out of this mess and won't have to pay any attention to them or do anything else for them. It would be really appreciated if my wife would acknowledge this and refrain from wasting any more of my time by challenging the divorce. Hopefully, she won't. However, considering the complete dearth of intelligence, she may as well. So, I'm ready for it too. I'm not too concerned, since I still have a backup copy of the emails on my laptop and a secure copy of the photos of the emails that were sent on her private email account. Even in the event that she chooses to remove her account, I know I'll be okay since she can't remove the pictures I have. In the worst case scenario, I'll even cover her alimony. At least I won't have to spend time with her though. She is fortunate. Rather than having her forcibly removed from our home, I'm giving her time to go on her own, since my name is on the house's registration. Right now, I'm holding out hope that this will be resolved quickly. The second update, I was correct, since she wasn't satisfied with the settlement I offered, basically simply the money she had spent throughout the marriage. My wife, who is a complete moron, has chosen to bargain. And I thought even that was rather giving. Whatever miracle she believes will occur, I have no idea what it is. Well done. She informed me via text yesterday that she had left the house today. I returned contentedly, assuming she had gone in with her parents or something. But I was devastated to find out that she had just moved across the street to our neighbor's house, meaning I would still have to see her every day in the faces of her partner. Since this was my home and I had every right to live anywhere I pleased, I even thought about returning to a hotel, but I decided against it. Just because they were going to make me feel uncomfortable didn't mean I was going to leave. Since staying with our neighbor was going to have a bad effect on the divorce case, and she was just making things worse for herself, I did wonder why my wife hadn't moved in with her parents instead. I didn't have to think too hard though, because I came across a message from my wife's father while going through all the unread ones I'd gotten from various individuals thus far. In the last several days, I hadn't replied to a number of texts, and his message had also been obscured by others. It was a lengthy text in which he expressed his regret for his daughter's behavior and informed me that they vehemently opposed it. It meant a lot to me that her father was saying these things, and it confirmed my feelings so strongly that I felt like crying but refrained. He expressed regret for my wife's actions and informed me that he would cut her off since she had informed him that she wished to challenge the divorce. I didn't understand what my wife was doing thus far, since I knew that anything she did would eventually backfire. Even someone like her must have had the common sense to see that she is either really dim or still has some wicked and twisted tactics under her sleeve. Although I'm hoping it's not the latter, I wouldn't rule it out. She is the worst, really. There will undoubtedly be some issues with this living situation, and I'm sure they'll attempt to make me feel uneasy or envious, but I'm determined not to let them irritate me or anger me, since they'll undoubtedly take advantage of that. Taking everything into account, because I don't have to stay in a hotel, I'm still saving a ton of money. Update 3. My wife's side of the divorce settlement discussions has been going poorly for the past month. In addition to making my work simpler by moving in with the man I accused her of cheating on me with, I was able to establish that she had been unfaithful to me. Therefore, there was no doubt regarding the veracity of my assertions. She had gone ahead and had an affair because she was trying to fabricate some negative charges that I was infertile and an alcoholic. She said that I had grown really resentful and rude to her during our infertility attempt. All of that was readily refuted though, since everyone was aware that I had given up alcohol last year when we chose to raise a family and haven't touched it since. Once more, I'm not sure why she believed it would work, and it was really foolish of her. Since her first plan had failed so badly and she was now too busy being a mother to be a cunning mastermind, I suppose she was simply clinging to what little she had left. Her baby daddy was too foolish, and she was too busy, and so they were. We both know by now that there is very little likelihood that she will leave with any alimony at all. Given that she was abruptly evicted from her boyfriend's home a few days ago along with her child, I assume she told him this. Yes, exactly. I heard a lot of shouting and screaming coming from their home, and a few minutes later I witnessed my wife and her kid being ejected while the father said deplorable things about her and called her every imaginable term. As I saw all of this from my living room, I saw him push my wife out of the room as she was giving birth. I was cursed for hurrying out to assist. I couldn't let a helpless infant suffer since it wasn't even his fault. My wife and her son were crying when I arrived at his house, and he had already slammed the door shut. After carrying the baby and taking my wife's hand, I walked them back to my house on the other side of the street. I then contacted my father-in-law to come get her. He arrived within an hour, whisked her away, and thanked me once again for everything I had done. My wife had been weeping uncontrollably for the whole hour, so I had essentially been soothing both of them. She convinced me to let it go since she didn't want any more hassle, even though I also wanted to contact the police. She repeatedly apologized for whatever had occurred and told me that she had lost all of her principles and self-respect because she was so anxious to be with the person she loved. She expressed her sincere regret for everything. She informed me that she would no longer engage in negotiations and would accept whatever came up. Thus, the divorce was completed more quickly. That must be one advantage. However, I hope she finally decides to charge this man and gets better herself. But at least I was a good person and did all I could. I also have no regrets. In the second story, my wife had an affair with her ex. I issued divorce papers, exposed her in front of her family, and regained control of my life. Although I was accustomed to hearing about it from various individuals or even on social media, I never imagined that I would actually experience something like this. However, going through something like that in real life can completely upend your universe. I work as a professor at a university and am a straightforward man. My wife, Lilac, and I have been wed for 10 years. We have 2 sons. When my aunt recommended to my mother that I ask Lilac out on a date, I met her at a party. I was constantly focused on my PhD and my studies. Therefore, I never really dated since I was never interested in dating. However, I was enthralled by Lilac's beauty after seeing her. She appeared as delicate as a flower, according to her name. I asked Lilac out since my parents had been pressuring me to get married for a while. At the party, our parents had already gotten to know one another, and they sincerely hoped that we would marry. The first date was fantastic. She was studying dentistry at the time and was a pleasure to be around. After a year of dating, we were married. 10 years have now passed. We went about our everyday lives as usual. She was a wonderful wife and mother. After she arrived, I never experienced any problems in my life, and she took excellent care of me. However, that was just the beginning, and I had no idea that, 10 years later, my curiosity would lead me in a surprising direction. I never really sought to find out about her history, yet knowing it would have helped me sort things out. Everything was going well, and until a month ago, I had never questioned her in our 10 years of marriage. Things became really bad for us both on a random day. Perhaps I was the one making assumptions in my mind. I never had a bad opinion of her before, so perhaps she was concealing something. She returned from her clinic one evening at a pretty typical hour. She didn't answer the phone when I tried to reach her. One initially contacted her clinic's receptionist because I assumed perhaps she had a lot of patients today. I was intrigued and apprehensive when she informed me that Lilac had not visited the clinic that day. Thinking about what may have occurred made me really nervous. I was unable to sleep at all. She appeared really exhausted when she entered the house after midnight. I intended to question her about her leave of absence today, before I had a chance to speak. She claimed she wanted to sleep because she had a lot of patients today as she passed me. I listened to her lie in front of me and knew the truth at the same time, so I simply sat on the couch and worriedly wondered what she may have been lying about. It was a novel experience. This made me angry and frustrated, but because it was late and I had work the next day, I made the decision to attempt to sleep. When I entered the room, I noticed that she was dressed for work and that her legs were dangling over the bed. I embraced her, and then truly embraced her. What could have been more unpleasant than discovering that your wife, who hasn't touched alcohol in your 10 years of marriage, had a strong alcohol odor? I put a blanket over her and examined her face. She was sleeping soundly, undisturbed. I departed for work early since I didn't want to engage in any talk in the morning. I continued thinking about it and was unable to fall asleep. I had to have my pupils' exam question sheets ready. I thus believed that it would be a poor idea to wake her up in the morning since it would cause tension and fights between us. As I was cuddling my cat on the front porch after work, I noticed her car in the parking lot. Through the window, I could see Lilac's. She was blushing and smiled as she texted someone. She set her phone down as soon as I walked in the door and got to work assisting our older kid, James, with his schoolwork. She normally gave me hugs and kisses, but after seeing me, her grin vanished this time. Her greeting to me seemed dull and uninspired. Having to deal with something so odd in a single day was really unpleasant. I asked her to bring me a hot cup of coffee later that night. She was smiling while texting someone while holding the coffee cup in the other hand. While her mother was occupied with a text message to an unknown individual, I glanced at her once and then turned away. But my second glance prevented our younger son, Max, from getting burned by the coffee on his head. For the first time in our 10 years of marriage, I yelled at Lilac for her negligence. I informed her that I wanted to talk to her about a couple things, since she kept saying she was sorry. In order to have a proper conversation, I let the boys play video games for a while. Knowing that this may offer her a clue, I decided to ask her where she was last night instead. I questioned her about who she was speaking to on the phone and where her focus was. She gave me an apologetic look, and just as she opened her mouth to speak, her phone began to ring. She apologized after it happened 3 times, which really irritated me. She informed me that she planned to catch up with an old buddy she had met the day before yesterday. She was running late because of it. She still hasn't informed me about the drinking issue or the fact that she wasn't at her clinic. Whether you agree with this or not, concealing facts is considered a type of petty cheating. The fact that she is still online and chit-chatting on her phone at practically midnight is what irritates me. Update 1. The last update was made a month ago. As I previously stated, I was too preoccupied with my schedule to provide an update the same evening because I was working on the questions for my students' examinations. Observing her conversing with someone at 4 in the morning wasn't out of the ordinary in the morning, but I became aware of this after listening to the chat. For everyone to read, I'd want to quote it. It wasn't a dream, no. My marriage is old and dull, and I'm sick of the same old sex every time. I need some spice in my life, God. Well, would you like to? It was most likely the response to her need for spice in her marriage. Was I truly a dull, out-of-date person? Was my husbandship a failure? I believe she was pleased with me. Did things change when a new buddy showed up? Who exactly is her new friend? She treated me so wonderfully, occasionally brought me flowers, and always slept in my arms. All of that was unbelievable to me. I returned to the bed's side. The door opened, and I heard her footsteps. She returned, climbed into the blanket, gave me a back hug as if nothing had occurred, and slept off. For me, instinct was more obvious than anything else. I also had a sneaking suspicion that she was moving away from me. To be honest, I became skeptical of her after that night and began to follow her. Things went south, and it was worse than I had anticipated. If someone is capable of small-scale cheating, they will ultimately have something hidden. My head was pounding so hard, and I was unable to sleep at all. I told her I could drop her down at the clinic after breakfast. At first, she didn't answer. She then informed me that she would be attending the parents' meeting to meet James's teacher. It was funny. Does she not realize that I was present at the meeting yesterday? However, I monitored the falsehood she was spreading to me. I walked off to work without saying anything. I received a call from her clinic on my way to the workplace. I was questioned by the receptionist why Lilac hadn't been to the clinic in 3 or 4 days. She wasn't even properly answering the calls or texts because they had appointments on the designated days. The patients were quite irate when the doctor failed to show up for their previously scheduled visits. My doubts were growing more every day, and one thing was leading me to another. I chose to observe it with my own eyes rather than as a puppet. I finished my task right away and let my intern finish it. I knew she wouldn't be at her clinic, so I left my office to go there. I went into the clinic and gave her a call. After 2 minutes, she phoned me back even though she didn't answer my call. She wasn't present when I told her that I had come to see her. After a few seconds of silence, she reluctantly replied that she was seeing an elderly patient who was unable to attend the office and that she needed to explain the receipt procedure. The receptionist told me there were no appointments for home visits, so I knew she was lying. When I returned home, my 2 boys were studying in silence. James and Max are looked after by our nanny. She was my mother's longtime friend and the person I trusted the most. So I prepared supper for them and completed the paperwork so I could request a few days off and follow my wife. Everything proceeded according to plan, and I made the decision to keep quiet until I had all the evidence I needed to support my suspicions. I questioned James about the meeting at the dinner table, and he asked me what meeting I was referring to. Since we had already been to the parents' meeting, Lil had a contented expression. After taking a mouthful, she said that she only wanted to discuss James's development with his instructor. I set down my spoon and turned to face her. She questioned me about the issue. I sighed and inquired as to whether she had seen the progress report. I contacted her via phone. She told me she had forgotten and apologized. I questioned her about how she could spend the entire day on the phone and miss something so crucial. In a frustrated tone, she inquired as to if I was implying that she spends her whole day on the phone. She was taking it the wrong way when I told her no. She got up, became enraged at what I had said, and yelled at me, accusing me of being irrational and of never having attempted to help the family. Although I was incensed by her comment, I chose to listen to her instead of venting my frustration. When I questioned her what she meant by this, she reiterated that our marriage had lost its spark and that I was a dull person. I chuckled and expressed my gratitude to her for using the talk as a barrier for her feelings and thoughts, and I kept eating my meal. She went out once more. She was on call at the same time, chatting and laughing. However, I didn't want to listen to the discussion. I wanted to gather the proof and witness it for myself. I knew she had a password since I never looked at her phone. I stole her phone and waited till she eventually fell asleep. The password was in her possession. I made many attempts, but it didn't open. One aspect of her forgetful nature stood out. In her notepad, she used to scribble passwords, It was there when I pulled out the journal. My hands were shaking from opening the text messages when the phone finally unlocked. But there it was, and I had to, the reality. I simply sat on the floor, holding the phone, and scrolled down to view the naked people sexting. I also adore you. She forwarded it to a man called Richard. The first sob that night. I can't recall the last time I shed such a tear. Because I needed confirmation and I didn't have much time, I put my palm over my lips to stop myself from crying and took a big breath. Before setting the phone aside, I emailed screenshots of their conversations to my phone right away. Fortunately, I discovered that there were images of the screenshots in the gallery when I had to remove them. I deleted all the data that would have shown her that I had looked at her phone after sending those photos to my own. Early in the day, I went to my buddy Elijah's apartment instead of leaving for work as usual. He knew every detail of my life, and we had been friends since we were little. When I explained everything to him, he too found it hard to believe. He said that he would have slapped me for such a joke if I hadn't showed him the evidence. I eventually drove to Richard's home, which was listed in one of the texts, and parked my car behind the tree. As Lilac would quickly discover, it was Elijah's automobile, not me. I waited, and when I spotted Richard outside his house holding flowers, Lilac stepped out of her car and gave him a deep embrace. I couldn't stare at them for more than a few seconds after snapping the photo. I kept thinking that everything could have been resolved with a little more honesty if she didn't like me. She couldn't stop cheating, though, and she didn't want to lose this family. Even though I was devastated, I was so proud of her and myself for being a steady and devoted marriage in a world full of cheats, but she crushed my ego. She took advantage of my composure to make a joke. This continued for 3 or 4 days, during which time I gathered enough proof to put oil on the fire and properly destroy the already ruined marriage. Our nanny, to whom I had previously informed everything, promised to notify me when my wife returned and departed. I granted our nanny permission to take today off after she called to let me know she would be visiting her ailing family. I contacted Lilac, informed her of the same, and requested that she return home in order for her to depart, leaving James and Max alone. She instantly agreed. Elijah and I were discussing our options and informed him about this situation. I lacked the guts to tell our parents these things. Lilac called me out of the blue, crying and telling me that Max had broken his arms after falling from the ladder and that she was transporting him to the emergency room. I panicked, unsure of what to do, and my skin became cold as worry gripped me. I requested Elijah to drive the car since I wasn't in the right frame of mind. The doctor assured us that it was only a minor injury and would recover in a few weeks when we arrived at the hospital. While Lilac was on the phone with my mother, I sighed with relief and planted a kiss on my son's forehead. I questioned James, who was seated next to me, about the incident and how it occurred. He informed me that Max was climbing the ladder and that he repeatedly called and yelled at his mother, but she ignored him since she was on the phone. Then Max collapsed after slipping. I was furious when I heard this. I went over to her and tossed her phone to the ground. Everybody was staring at us. I yelled and screamed at her for her reckless behavior. Elijah tried to soothe me, but I was unresponsive. Max could have suffered a severe injury. She was attempting to paint herself as the victim by accusing me of being an absent parent, despite the fact that I talked a lot. At least I was better than her and didn't have sex with anybody on her back, I muttered in her ear as I drew nearer to her after hearing this. She had the appearance of a terrified cat. Elijah took our sons to his house after that fight in the hospital, and I returned home with Lilac. On the way back, we said nothing. Furthermore, she was only acting remorseful. I noticed that she was messaging him several times. That infuriated me even more. I was astounded by what she told me. She must have assumed that I would feel sorry for her. But I don't feel sorry for those who cheat. A month before to our marriage, she revealed to me that she had dated Richard throughout her high school years. She had no option but to marry me, even though she never wanted to. You see, Lily's father is a dentist as well, and owned a clinic that Lilac was interested in. However, her father made it clear that she had to marry a respectable person to inherit the clinic, or else it would pass to her brother, who was 5 years younger than Lily, and also wanted to become a dentist. She ended their relationship and chose to wed me because Richard was unemployed and a rookie at the time. Richard, who works as a model for a fashion design firm, came to her clinic a month ago to have his teeth cleaned for a photo shoot, she said. Things gradually became worse once they met again. leading to this. She was already weeping and pleading with me for another opportunity to make things right, but it was all a farce, and I was crying too. She could not afford to lose a secure family, and she was well aware at this point that Richard would not marry her. She also said that I wasn't her kind of person, and she responded by feeling constrained half the time. I questioned her about if she was blaming me rather than her own behavior for cheating, since I had a different personality. She got up and began yelling at me, saying that she liked Richard more than I did since I didn't understand. I strode over to her, seized her by the hands, and ordered her to stop her manipulation and lies. I informed her that she didn't have to tell me to cheat. It was her own decision. I did everything I could since I was furious about her statements. I told Elijah that I would be staying at his apartment for a bit and requested him to drop James and Max off at their grandparents'. Since I got to his apartment, I haven't talked to him. Simply put, I'd rather not speak to anyone. Perhaps letting my feelings run wild in front of strangers will help me relax. I simply can't think clearly. The second update. Hello everyone. I apologize for the delay in my post. I appreciate you checking up on me. The most recent acceptable update is this one. Max is now completely recovered, and I was working on my most recent project, basically something that feeds my ego. I completed my college assignments over my 3 days at Elijah's house. I avoided any conversation about this and refused to discuss any of this with him. When I returned home after some time, I was shocked to see that it was decked up with balloons and flowers. Then Lilac arrived with flowers and began to apologize and beg for my pardon. I avoided talking to her despite the fact that she had been phoning and messaging me. I hated her and had no affection for her. However, I consented to be duped by her once again as payback. I could see now how pompous she was all the time. She never really looked after the children, to be honest. The nanny did. And it's not a favor for your own children, it's a duty as a mother. The children preferred me, or the nanny, above their own mother because of this. In addition to getting ready for Max's birthday, I was also occupied with couple therapy and other efforts to mend our relationship. She was meeting Richard on my back once a week, and she was making a great effort to make it seem real. Prior to everything happening, we made the decision to invite my parents and siblings, as well as other close family members, to his birthday. Birthdays used to be so much joy, but now, since she was acting the entire time, it feels horrible. I instructed James and Max to go to the other room and open their presents while everyone was relaxing after the cake-cutting ceremony, which was the time to reveal the largest gift to her father. I asked Lilac over the phone if she planned to give her father the gifts she had packed. Her father and everyone else appeared to be in a good mood. She already had Lilac, though. She continued to nod her head and use her signals to indicate no. As I gave her father the present, her eyes were watering. When he opened it, he saw all the photographs. He got up and yelled at her for destroying our marriage and meeting that unemployed idiot once more. The lavender divorce papers, which arrived 10 days earlier, were another present. When I told her father everything, her brother and my family were in utter disbelief. In order to prevent her from damaging his reputation, her father advised her to sign the paperwork, leave the hospital tomorrow, and find employment elsewhere. Her mother was inconsolable, and Lilac was weeping and pleading with her father for forgiveness. This was spoiled for everyone by her. I could have stopped it with a little regret, but she kept seeing him after that. After her careless behavior, I forbade her from staying with James and Max, although I did let her see them on the weekends. We never spoke to her again after the divorce, since we had gone our separate ways. Even after spending a considerable amount of time with her, she was missed by James and Max. But having a single parent is preferable to having a careless one. In my case, I'm continuing with my life, occupying myself with job and kids. But like a parasite, the past will never leave me. However, my ego was satiated by my retaliation. I was able to overcome my mental health issues when I witnessed her not obtaining what she desired. And I went on living my life. Story 3. Because I married before my ideal sister, my parents did not attend my wedding. After 4 years together, their idyllic family image is now coming apart. With the exception of my parents and my sister Marlene, who is 35, I, at the age of 32, was married 8 months ago. Everyone attended the wedding. My sister and I have never really gotten along, so I wasn't too surprised by her absence, but my parents' choice to forego the event was shocking. But I should have expected that given our history. I'll tell you a little about the dynamics of our family. I can't hold my parents entirely responsible for my sister's lifelong preference for her over me. She has excelled in practically everything. From the moment she could walk, she was the life of the party in every place she entered. In primary school, she took first place in every spelling bee, science fair, and talent show. In high school, the roles of prom queen, valedictorian, and class president were essentially the same. Before focusing on her business degree in college, she explored modeling since she was tall, slim, and sufficiently pretty. I vividly remember when she landed her first modeling job in her sophomore year to rejoice. My parents threw a spectacular celebration for her friends and all of our family members. We still have a framed copy of her first professional headshot hanging in our living room, just over the hearth. I graduated with a degree in computer science the same year. They just said, "Well done," and went on to planning Marlene's upcoming picture session. After graduating, she got a position at a well-known corporation and quickly rose the corporate ladder. At 30, she already has a company vehicle and a corner office, making her a senior executive. Meanwhile, I am a mid-level software engineer at a reputable computer business. Even if I enjoy my job and it's a respectable one, it's not the kind of occupation that makes parents brag in front of their family. I'm also shorter and larger than my sister. My mother made offensive comments about how I looked. When I was growing up, you constantly placed me on diets and signed me up for exercise programs that I didn't want to go to. Marlene never struggles with her weight, she would say. Or, with a little more work, you could look as good as your sister. By high school, I had learned to disregard these comments, but they still had an effect. I've come to terms with these differences over the years. At some point, I realized that my parents never enjoyed my achievements as much as they enjoyed Marlene's. What might I do? I spent years taking seminars and joining groups in an attempt to get their favor. For a little while, they even tried modeling and encouraged it. My sister never lets me forget this failure, but nothing was ever adequate. They were very captivated by my sister's accomplishments, and I was only the second daughter. In my mid-20s, I stopped trying to impress them. I focused on building relationships with people that appreciated me for who I am, living my own life, and developing professionally on my own terms. Knowing that my parents were always worried about keeping up appearances has, to be honest, made things better since then. In order to avoid confrontation during our required Christmas dinners and other family gatherings, I maintained a superficial relationship with them. They had Marlene to drool over, so I wouldn't smile when they gushed over her next romantic partner or vacation destination. My emotional detachment seemed to go unnoticed by them. Then, through a common friend, I met my spouse at a computer conference. Unlike my family, he saw me, really saw me. He appreciated my ability to code, my sarcastic sense of humor, and yes, even my physical type. He never once suggested that I should alter or compare myself to others from the start. After 4 years of dating, while we were alone at home having takeout with our favorite TV playing in the background, he proposed to me. It was perfect. I informed my parents I got engaged last year, of course. Their answer ought to have been my first hint. There was silence, no congratulation. After asking whether I was sure I wanted to dive straight in, my mother suggested that I might want to be in better physical shape before the wedding. My father spoke very little. My husband saw their strange response during the engagement party, which I was too nervous to completely understand at the moment. They spent much of the evening in a corner huddled over my mother's phone. Then my husband told me he had overheard them on the phone with Marlene, who was obviously weeping. They were discussing how they never anticipated Rebecca getting married first, and that this wasn't the original plan. Despite not even being engaged at the time, he heard in passing that there were a few little delays throughout the wedding preparation process. My mother was not interested in helping me choose a dress or venue because she had already created many wedding Pinterest boards for Marlene. All my mother said was that it was useful and fit my body. I felt beautiful when I picked out my outfit, a simple yet gorgeous A-line gown. I ended up doing most of the preparations with my future mother-in-law, who treated me like the daughter she never had. Together with my spouse, I went over and double-checked the guest list. Both traditional and internet wedding invitations were sent out to ensure that no one was left out. The email invites came with red receipts, so I know my parents got theirs. I discovered they hadn't RSVP'd, so I called texted, and emailed them many times. When I asked my boys if they were busy and needed to check their schedules, they either ignored me or gave me misleading answers. I was too busy getting ready for the wedding to expend too much energy worrying about it. My in-laws were really helpful, helping with everything from floral arrangements to seating charts. Not even during my husband's sister's beautiful bridal shower was the painfully evident absence of my own family mentioned. The wedding day itself was lovely, despite the absence of my parents. Following the morning ceremony, we had a relaxed afternoon reception in a garden. We looked so happy and in love, and everyone was correct. However, there were moments when their absence seemed like physical pain, like when I couldn't attend the father-daughter dance or saw the front row seats vacant. After the wedding and honeymoon, I looked for solutions. When I finally called them, they told me they had never received a formal invitation and that they were quite sad. Mom went on a long diatribe about how irresponsible I was, how she had always wanted to help plan her daughter's weddings, and how she couldn't understand why I would exclude them from such an important event. This confused me because I was certain that we had invited them in both ways throughout the conversation. I checked our records and confirmed that we had mailed them. The delivery of the actual invitations was also verified. They tried to gaslight me, but I didn't challenge them. I just apologized for the mistake and hung up. My husband later mentioned other instances that showed their actual motivations, such how they seemed shocked rather than happy when we informed them we were engaged, or how they kept finding excuses not to help with the wedding preparations, as he didn't want to make my wedding plans any more stressful. He hadn't mentioned these discoveries before. In hindsight, however, the pattern seemed obvious. They couldn't stand the thought of me, the less successful daughter, being married before their beloved Malene. In their view, I would never be able to compete with my sister, and their behavior just confirmed what I had always known. Finding out that even my wedding day, which should have been a celebration of love and new beginnings, became yet another front in their never-ending battle to maintain their perfect family image, with Marlene at its center, was the most disheartening thing. After a year of dating, Marlene just became engaged to her partner. I talked to family members in family group discussions that I don't take part in, they said. My parents publicly declared how thrilled they were to plan a lavish wedding for her. My mother is bringing Marlene to secret fittings at high-end boutiques, and they are already bragging about landing fancy venues and dresses. I was not permitted to spend any mother-daughter time. The fact that so many members of our family are now declining to attend Marlene's wedding is interesting. An engagement celebration. It seems that my relatives started talking about my parents' behavior at my wedding. When my relatives ask why my parents didn't come to my wedding, I just respond with what I believe to be true. When I got married before their cherished daughter, they couldn't stand it. I don't try to be sympathetic or exaggerate the facts. I just tell them the way I see them. A few days ago, I received a message from my parents accusing me of deliberately trying to ruin Marlene's wedding. The relatives they have spoken to are allegedly making excuses not to attend any of the events connected to her wedding. After hearing about my parents' treatment of me, my cousin, to whom my sister vented, told her that people are hesitant to visit. My folks say I'm spreading lies because I'm jealous of my sister's upcoming extravagant wedding. I'm just giving them the truth about what happened, which is the issue. Instead of holding me responsible for the outcomes, they might want to think about their own behavior if the reality portrays them as awful, as things keep changing. Maintaining the illusion of a connection with my parents is becoming more and more difficult for me. I eventually realized that no matter what I accomplished, I would never be enough for them because of the way they behaved at my wedding. The worst part of my wedding is no longer their absence. It's accepting that I never had the supportive, loving parents I had always hoped for. Right now, I'm focusing on building a life with someone who truly values me for who I am. However, if anything significant changes, I'll keep you informed. First update, a lot has happened since my last post, which was 2 weeks ago. In the end, I decided to have a face-to-face conversation with my parents over their behavior at my wedding and their ongoing accusations that I spoiled my sister's special day. After reading your words of encouragement, I thought it was time to lay everything out. When I started receiving texts from them about their troubled family background. During our phone conversation, my parents immediately began accusing me of being envious of Marlene and orchestrating the whole affair. I took an action that I had never taken before. They expected me to agree with them, but I didn't. I told them, You're right. Instead of defending myself like I typically would, I'm jealous. Not Marlene's accomplishments, not her job, nor her looks. You never even tried to show me the same kind of love and support that you've given her, and I'm jealous of that. The line was interrupted. Then my mother started saying that they had always treated us equally and that I was making this up. At that moment, something inside of me broke. Emotions that had been suppressed for years suddenly surfaced. Every birthday when Marlene's latest achievement overshadowed my own, I told them. Because Marlene's prom dress cost more than my entire year's worth of college textbooks, my mother canceled my high school graduation luncheon when she received a modeling callback. My father tried to interrupt me by saying I was exaggerating, but I persisted. I described how it was to see them, spend years planning a fake wedding for my sister while ignoring my own. I explained how it hurt to see my parents' chairs empty and how my mother-in-law had to assist me with everything, from planning the wedding to shopping for clothes. Their response was instructive. Instead of embracing any of my arguments, they turned the tables on me. If you felt this way, why didn't you say anything? As though I hadn't made an effort to communicate with them for years. My mom was adamant. My father continued by saying that I was being unfair and vindictive by talking about these feelings with our family members. At that moment, my mother said something that finally made everything clear. We never thought you would be so spiteful as to attempt to spoil Marlene's wedding. She said, but we always knew you were insecure about her success. We didn't raise you like this. They couldn't even hear me, I realized. They thought my feelings and their actions had nothing to do with the whole situation. It's related to Marlene's response. They cared less about the harm they had done to me and more about her upcoming wedding. For the first time in my life, I didn't try to improve the situation, not even during this conversation about their absence from my wedding. I didn't apologize or take anything back. Instead, I told them what was on my mind. On one point, you're right. You reared me. You taught me that I would never be good enough, that Marlene's achievements would always be greater than mine, that maintaining your perfect family image was more important than how I felt. You didn't want to teach me this, but you also taught me that I deserved better than this. There was a lengthy silence before my father spoke. His tone was calm and composed as he talked. Perhaps we should quit pretending to be awful parents. We thought you would help us resolve this, since you have already decided that we are, and you clearly like watching us suffer because you are family. However, you have obviously chosen your own choices. My mother dealt the final blow. Maybe you just couldn't handle not being the focus of attention, notwithstanding our constant efforts to treat you both equally. It's not our fault, Rebecca. Playing the victim was your choice. I didn't try to argue. Why would it be important? They had just confirmed what I had been saying. They couldn't acknowledge that they had anything to do with it. I just hung up and said goodbye, even throughout this final conversation. After the call, I was pleasantly surprised to feel comforted. Yes, there were tears, but they weren't the sloppy, tragic ones I recall from my childhood. They were tears of liberation. For the first time, I had said what I needed to say without repressing my emotions or feeling bad about them. My spouse later noticed me sitting on our back patio, watching the sunset. Without a word, he took my hand and sat next to me. They won't ever change, will they? After some time, I asked him. No, but you have. Squeezing my hand, he said. And that's what matters. He's right. I've evolved. She is no longer the little child who desperately sought her parents' approval. The lady who emerged from that final conversation doesn't require their validation anymore. Holding out hope that my parents would change for the first time is more difficult than accepting that they will never be the people I need them to be. I don't give a damn about the family turmoil or the outcome of my sister's wedding. They now have to handle whatever comes up after I have my say. The strangest thing is that I feel like a weight I've been carrying all my life has finally been removed. Maybe I needed the capacity to stop aiming for love that should have come naturally, even though it's not the happy ending I had hoped for with my parents. Second update after my encounter with our parents 3 days ago, things have taken an unexpected turn. Marlene decided to become involved in the drama, but her plan was a complete failure. Yesterday morning, I received a well-written note from my sister. It was clear from her text that she had become patronizing over the years. You were very improper in what you said to your parents. They have given us everything and supported us through every phase of our life. You can't just blame them for being bad parents because you're self-conscious about your own life choices. She proceeded with her usual mix of subtle digs and moral superiority. Although I can appreciate that your wedding didn't go as planned, it doesn't mean you should attempt to ruin mine. Wanting a celebration that recognizes those of us who have worked hard to achieve certain criteria is quite acceptable. Not everything has to be a competition, Rebecca. I chose not to respond. I have found that engaging with her only gives her more ammo, after enduring her deceptive behavior for years. Instead, I just blocked her number. I thought that would be the end of it, because Marlene has never been one to tolerate being ignored. A few hours later, my husband contacted me at work, his laughter so loud that he was unable to talk. Marlene obtained his personal number because she couldn't seem to reach me directly. Sent him a series of texts detailing the specific reasons why our sister relationship has never been positive, most likely via an acquaintance named Viacom. She started off her first message to him in a way that was professional enough for me to feel obligated to get in touch as Rebecca, sister, and someone who genuinely cares about the welfare of our family. But it quickly evolved into her true intentions. She told my husband that since he was the new guy in Rebecca's life, he had a duty to assist me in acting in a more appropriate way. The messaging has grown more condescending. The dynamics of a family are complicated. She added that someone with Rebecca's sensitivity could not see the wider picture. My spouse is a competent software architect with an MBA. She suggested that he help me see reason before I destroy family ties forever. The real stinger, however, was her attempt to capitalize on what she thought were his social climbing instincts. She actually wrote, "Don't you realize that keeping up positive ties with prosperous family members like me might help you in the future?" Rebecca has always been able to see through Marlene's facade, so her actions are only harming her own chances and, consequently, yours. My husband found her effort at manipulation amusing. He especially appreciated her assumption that he would be impressed in some way by her business rank or the possibility of networking possibilities. She truly doesn't know me at all, as he stated himself. When I arrived home that evening, we reviewed the text together. Rather than being angry or insulted, I was laughing with my husband. It was freeing to see Marlene's tricks revealed, especially when they were directed at someone who was completely unaware of them. This interaction taught me something important about my sister. Despite all of her accomplishments and success, she remains that insecure teenager who has to undermine others to feel better about herself. Her lack of knowledge about healthy relationships is evident in her belief that, once her direct approach failed, she could use my husband to dominate me. The most telling part was how quickly she shifted to attempting to turn my husband against me. That's exactly what she did in high school. When she couldn't bully me directly, she tried to incite my friends against me. Same tactics, different decade. Now that I have this new perspective, I can see how Marlene's behavior throughout our early years went beyond normal sibling rivalry. She worked hard to maintain her position as the beloved kid, often complimenting me and our parents on how much superior she was. Whatever I managed to do had to be overshadowed by her. She had to tell everyone I made friends with about my flaws. I react differently to her games now. I would have started to doubt myself after reading her texts. It was 10 years ago. 5 years ago today, I would have been angry and hurt. I just find her obvious attempts at manipulation funny, and I'm tired of the drama. My husband's reaction was perfect. Instead of getting caught up in her drama, he just answered, "We appreciate your concern for Rebecca's and her husband's well-being. My goal is to make her happy, not to control her actions. I believe it would be better if you spoke with Rebecca directly about any potential issues. Enjoy your day." When Marlene didn't get the required reaction, she sent one final message. "It appears that she has also poisoned you against the family. Don't claim that I didn't make an effort to assist when everything blows up in your face." Ironically, my determination to avoid my family's toxic dynamics has been reinforced by Marlene's attempt to help. According to her texts to my hubby, nothing has changed. She remains the same crafty person who feels compelled to control every narrative and who sees any deviation from her ideal family script as dangerous. Perhaps the nicest part of the whole thing is realizing how completely ineffective her attempts at persuasion were. Totally unconcerned by her anxieties of societal consequences, she was able to draw my spouse and I closer together instead of making us drift away. In the evening, we made light of her texts and made plans for a weekend getaway. I've realized that maintaining facades and telling stories isn't what actual family is all about. Supporting one another, joking together, and standing together are the key. when someone, even your own sister, tries to control you. More than ever, I'm convinced that I'd be better off avoiding the turmoil surrounding Marlene's wedding rather than being embroiled in my family's never-ending power battles. My spouse and I have decided that we should focus on making ourselves happy. It is believed the best kind of retribution is success. However, I'm learning that dazzling others isn't the key to true success. It's about embracing your choices and surrounding yourself with people that support rather than obstruct your personal growth. By that measure, I feel more accomplished than ever. The third update. Things have changed unexpectedly after my sister's failed effort to manipulate my husband 2 weeks ago. Despite my parents' frantic efforts to restore their image, things are becoming worse. Through family connections, I learned that my parents had been frantically trying to change the story. Because I'm jealous of Marlene's perfect wedding, they have started calling each family individually and accusing me of spreading false information. They say I'm only bitter because her wedding will be far more elegant and beautiful than mine was. In their latest story, I deliberately excluded them from my wedding so I could play the victim. It's amusing that they still use the same email addresses since the beginning of email and live in the same house they've had for 30 years. However, they claim that I delivered their invitation to an outdated physical location and email address. The good news is that they are utterly failing in their attempts to restrict the harm. Our relatives don't think it's true. In fact, several relatives have related first-hand stories of my parents' history of favoritism. An aunt told me that my mother had done similar things at family weddings before to make sure Marlene was the light of the party. The most satisfying development is how my extended family has responded to my parents' deception. Marlene's wedding has lost the backing of important family members, some of whom were supposed to play important roles in the occasion. The privileged area they were able to gain access to through familial ties could no longer be available to them. During a family gathering last weekend, schedule issues suddenly arose even for a family friend's premium clothing business. There was a tipping point. My mother apparently got irritated when someone foolishly asked about my wedding photos due to envy. She launched into a defensive diatribe, accusing me of trying to ruin the family and claiming that I had changed since being married. Her outburst didn't work. Beautiful. Numerous family members who were ignorant of the situation further damaged their already damaged reputation. It's particularly ironic that my parents' desperate attempts to uphold their perfect family facade are the cause of its disintegration. Every time they try to explain why they couldn't attend my wedding, in the end, they reveal more about their true selves. The more they try to paint me as the villain, the more people realize how dishonest they are. After being neutral at first, family members are suddenly taking sides. Even my father's brother, who had always been quiet to keep the peace, recently expressed regret for not speaking up sooner about their treatment of me. He has decided not to bring his family to any of Marlene's wedding-related events. I haven't, since I don't have to respond to any of this directly. Taking care of everything for me is the truth. When Marlene and my parents try to spin the story, they invariably end up exposing more of their harmful behavior. It turns out that all those years of keeping quiet and enduring their treatment in an attempt to maintain harmony was actually simply a means of condoning their behavior. My spouse used the greatest language when he expressed it. Over many years, they created a facade of the perfect family, but it was founded on partiality and emotional manipulation. It was going to collapse eventually. Personally, I'm doing better than ever. I don't have to stress over trying to please my parents anymore. The strain of managing Marlene's feelings has lessened. For the first time in my life, I'm not worried about maintaining their ideal family image, rather of taking action. Sometimes the finest form of vengeance is to just let the truth speak for itself. I'm thankful that Reddit gave me the confidence to stand up for myself. How much your advice and support have meant to me along this journey is beyond your comprehension. Sometimes you need to see strangers you met online to realize what real family support looks like. I appreciate you watching. Please click the notification bell if you haven't already, in order to receive updates on additional startling real-life stories that are happening in your area. Story 4. 1 week before to her wedding, I saw my pampered sister kissing my lover, informed her fiancé. He stunned everyone during the wedding, even if they thought he ignored it. I was in a difficult situation with my 29-year-old boyfriend and my 26-year-old sister at the age of 28. With my sister's wedding quickly approaching, I started to see that she was acting strangely near my partner. At first, I felt anxious about modest, subtle behaviors rather than anything overt. My sister would frequently make remarks like, "Wow, you're so funny." That seemed innocuous at first. She responded to everything my boyfriend said with a little too much enthusiasm, even when his jokes weren't that funny. I initially attempted to ignore it, assuming that maybe she was just being extra amiable because of the excitement of the impending wedding. But as time went on, I started to see more concerning indicators. She began looking for ways to interact with him informally, such as putting a hand on his arm while they were talking or softly bumping into one another as she passed. These were subtle but clear signals. Additionally, I saw that she kept her gaze on him for a little too long while he wasn't looking, which made my stomach turn. I made the decision to speak with my boyfriend about my sister's particularly flirty behavior at a family meal one evening after we got home. "Did you notice Sarah's behavior tonight?" I questioned him, turning to face him. He gave me a perplexed look and said, "What do you mean?" I went on to describe the actions I had seen. The overindulgent laughter, the needless physical contact, the persistent looks. "I think you're overanalyzing things," he remarked, shrugging after listening for a bit. "Most likely she's just thrilled about the wedding. It's not harmful." I kept feeling that something wasn't quite right, even after he reassured me. I didn't think it was a harmless scenario. My partner reassured me, but I still had a hunch that something wasn't right. I thus made the decision to monitor the situation more closely in the hopes that my concerns were unjustified and that I was simply overreacting. However, the weeks that followed were stressful. I was always observing my sister and taking note of everything she did whenever we were together. It became evident that she was always attempting to put herself in close proximity to my partner. When she could, she would frequently sit next to him, and she appeared to come up with a never-ending list of reasons to beg for his assistance with wedding-related chores. We were gathered at my parents' house for a family BBQ one day, and I was standing right there. I went inside once to use the restroom, and when I came back, I witnessed something that broke my heart. In a corner of the yard, standing abnormally close to each other, my sister and my boyfriend were having a quiet conversation. My stomach turned uncomfortably as I heard my sister laughing at something he said. They immediately separated as soon as they saw me, and my sister left as if nothing had occurred. Despite feeling sick and angry, I refrained from confronting them right away, not wanting to cause a commotion at a family event. I waited till we arrived home that evening instead. I made an effort to address the subject as calmly as possible while we were by ourselves. I wanted to know what my sister and my boyfriend had been talking about earlier. Apparently taken aback by my inquiry, he clarified that they were only discussing a few wedding-related topics, such as the musical choices. I wasn't satisfied with his response. I couldn't help but wonder why they had to stand so close to each other for such a basic talk. With a visibly irritated sigh, he attempted to brush off my worries. Insisting that my sister was only being nice, he reassured me once more that nothing was happening. However, at this moment, I was unable to suppress my emotions any longer. My sister was literally throwing herself at him, and he was doing nothing to stop it. So I vented my fury. He appeared wounded by what I said, and he gave me a sad face as he asked what I specifically wanted of him. She was my sister, he reminded me, and he was only being courteous. It didn't seem possible for him to tell her to back off. I made it apparent that he was just interested in a friendship relationship by telling him that he should at least establish some limits. However, he maintained that he had no interest in her, and that there was nothing to explain since I was imagining issues that didn't exist. We were both upset and confused of what to do next, as our talk ran in circles, since neither of us was open to hearing the other side. It was obvious that our talk was going nowhere after we argued for some time without coming to an agreement. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't convince my lover to realize what was so painfully evident to me, that I was just hallucinating things. Ultimately, with the problem still unsolved, we both went to bed feeling irate and dissatisfied. It wasn't until the next day that I knew I had to face my sister. Avoiding the problem was obviously just making it worse. I so made the decision to give her a call and ask if we could get coffee together. She consented without hesitation. We agreed to meet in a little cafe close to her flat, and her voice was upbeat and apparently unaffected by my mounting worries. I was anxious when we first met. As I mixed my coffee, my hands shook a little. In contrast, my sister was in a good mood and spoke excitedly about her wedding preparations. The fact that she appeared to be totally unaware of my distress simply made things more challenging for me. I listened to her ramble for a few minutes, before realizing I could no longer contain myself. My voice reflecting the severity of what I was going to say, I cut her off in the middle of her sentence. I informed her that we had an important matter to address. Taken aback by the abrupt change in tone, my sister gave me a startled glance and inquired as to what was wrong. I started to explain after taking a big breath to regain my composure. I informed her that I felt uncomfortable with the way she had been acting around my partner in time. I talked about the things that had been upsetting me for a while, the flirtation, the casual touches, and the lingering glances. I made it clear that she had to change her conduct. I saw her face change as I talked, displaying a variety of emotions. There was astonishment at first, followed by perplexity and rage. She insisted on knowing what I was discussing, adamantly disputing any flirtation she may have had with Tom. I insisted that she had been doing just that, and I wouldn't back down. Whether she understood or not, I told her that what she was doing was not only improper, but it was also really upsetting me. She laughed in response. She told me I was being silly, but it was hardly a real one. She dismissed my worries by claiming that she was only being polite and that Tom was almost family. But I could see that this chat had touched a chord, because her remarks didn't really help to diffuse the tension between us. I realized as I sat there that this was not going to be a simple problem to address, and that our distance from one another was probably just going to grow. I finally lost my temper and vented my annoyance, pointing out that it went beyond simple friendship. I clarified that she was always looking for reasons to touch my partner, be close to him, and laugh at all of his jokes, even the ones that didn't seem very humorous to me. I was becoming more uneasy as I spoke since it was obvious what she was doing. Her face was crimson with rage and shock, as I could see. My claims obviously stunned her, especially considering how near they were to her wedding. She gave me a scathing reaction, casting doubt on my self-assurance and implying that I must be quite insecure to accuse her of such behavior. Even though what she said hurt, I felt I had to defend myself. I made an effort to clarify that my worries were about respect rather than insecurity. I informed her that her conduct needed to cease right away because she was going too far. Our chat came to an abrupt halt as she got up, her chair making a loud scraping sound against the floor. She proclaimed that she would not sit there and listen to what she saw as baseless and hysterical charges. She was quite clear that it was my problem, not hers, if I couldn't trust my own sister. She then raced out of the cafe, leaving me feeling conflicted and alone. I started to doubt myself and felt terrible. Was I overreacting? Was I only being suspicious? My partner saw right away that something wasn't right when I got home. I told him about my recent talk with my sister when he inquired what had happened, as I explained the specifics. I could see his face getting more worried. After I was done, he sighed deeply and said he felt I had made a huge error. With Sarah's wedding approaching, he was concerned that she would suffer severe emotional harm. "Do you feel defensive?" If he was siding with her, I asked him. Despite his rapid assurance that he wasn't picking sides, he said he didn't think Sarah had been flirting with him, even if she had, which he didn't think was plausible. He felt that the best way to handle the matter was not to face her so directly. I was left feeling even more torn by his remarks, wondering if I had made the correct decision. I couldn't resist asking as tears started to form in my eyes. What was I to do, therefore? Simply disregard it? My voice betrayed my sadness and irritation. My partner came over and put his arms around me tenderly, after noticing how upset I was. He made the suggestion that I may have handled things better, that I might have discussed it with him more beforehand, or that I might have approached Sarah in a less combative manner. He said that now that everything had happened the way it did, Sarah was probably angry with us both, and that this would ruin her wedding, making things seem so uncomfortable. Overwhelmed, I withdrew from his hug and asked him a question. I'm solely to blame for this. I had to know whether he really thought I was too responsible for the state of affairs. He let out a long sigh, obviously having trouble putting it into words, and clarified that he didn't want to hold me exclusively responsible. He did, however, believe that I could have overreacted and allowed my feelings to control me. After some time, it became clear that we would not be able to come to an agreement. Our viewpoints were obviously different, and neither of us appeared eager to completely comprehend the others. I was left alone with my whirling doubts and thoughts until he finally made the decision to go to bed. There was tension in the days that followed. My sister and I had become painfully distant because she had completely stopped talking to me. After noticing Sarah's concern, my parents phoned me to ask why she was so unhappy. I made an effort to clarify the circumstances, but based on their answers, I could see that they too thought I had overreacted. I became more and more unsure of what to do as the wedding day approached. My role was to serve as a bridesmaid, a crucial duty that suddenly seemed more like a chore. Even whether Sarah still wanted me to be a part of her special day was uncertain to me. However, my boyfriend was still invited, and he proposed that we both go to demonstrate that there was no animosity. However, I felt physically uncomfortable at the idea of witnessing my sister go down the aisle, knowing how sad and furious she was. Everything had turned into a twisted mess, and I had no idea how to sort it out without making things worse. I called Sarah many times, but she didn't pick up. I apologized and said we should have talked in my voicemails, but she never returned my calls. I even went to her apartment, but she shut the door. I wasn't persuaded, but as the wedding day approached, my anxiousness increased. My boyfriend insisted that I let go and that everything will work itself out. When I arrived at the wedding in my dream, everyone turned to gaze at me while pointing and whispering. I awoke trembling icily. Update: after my altercation with Sarah, things became worse. When she brought up my accusations with our mother, she got quite angry. She yelled at me over the phone about how selfish and anxious I could be just before Sarah's wedding. "How could you accuse your own sister of that?" she yelled. I attempted to express my point of view, but she refused to listen. She suggested that I apologize to Sarah and take immediate action to resolve this issue. Our family was under unbearable hardship. Sarah still stays away from me. My parents are also offended at the moment. I became even more unhappy and agitated when my partner, Tom, insisted that I was exaggerating. A week before the wedding, I went to my parents' house to attempt to make things right. As I reached the front door, I heard quiet conversations coming from the side of the house. I walked curiously to the garden and paused in wonder at what I saw. Sarah and Tom were ensnared in a passionate embrace, partially hidden behind a large plant. They gave each other a strong kiss. Tom's waist was encircled by Sarah's legs. Under her top was his hand. They didn't even notice me standing there since they were so engrossed in one other. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I was unable to move or speak for a minute as all the breath left my lungs. A strong sensation of rage and betrayal swept through me as the truth of what I was seeing started to set in. I started shouting because my emotions got the better of me. What the heck is this? The intensity of what I was experiencing made my voice shake. The response from both of them came instantly. Both my sister and my boyfriend's guilty faces betrayed them totally as they sprang in horror. Tom stammered as he struggled to find the correct words, and Sarah's face went pale as she knew she'd been caught. It isn't what it appears to be, yet it was precisely what it appeared to be, confirming all of my suspicions and anxieties. As I coughed out, tears started to fall down my cheeks. How were you able to? My lover and my own sister. There was no mistaking the sadness in my voice. Sarah started crying too, and as she tried to apologize, her voice trembled with sadness. She cried as she tried to explain, "I'm so sorry. I couldn't listen to any of their justifications, even if we didn't intend for this to occur." Without another word, the treachery was too profound to perish. I ran back to my car after turning and sprinting away. As I drove away, their cries for me to come back were ignored. As I drove off, my thoughts was racing with hurt and incredulity. My phone started ringing all the time. Tom first, then Sarah, and eventually my mother. None of them I could bring myself to respond to. The agony was too new, too intense. I was numb when I got home at last. I quickly packed a backpack with a few days' worth of necessities and some clothing. After what had just transpired, I couldn't stay here. I texted Tom one more time to let him know that we were done. Never try to get in touch with me again. I then disconnected all further connection by turning off my phone and walked out. I'm now writing this from a hotel room in a nearby city, not sure what to do next. I am aware that I will not be able to attend the wedding, which is only a few days away. This deception has destroyed my connection with my sister and may do irreversible harm to the closeness we previously enjoyed. I feel like everything in my universe has been completely upended. In the end, I was correct all along, even though everyone thought I was insane for thinking something was off. I'm wondering how I'll ever be able to trust anyone again after this knowledge, and the anguish is nearly unbearable. read it then. I would appreciate any guidance on how to proceed from this point forward. Update. Following the heartbreaking revelation that my sister Sarah was seeing my now ex-boyfriend Tom, I was unable to comprehend what had happened for a few days. Both of their messages and missed calls, along with those from my parents, were vibrating on my phone. However, I simply couldn't bring myself to answer. I couldn't bear to be wounded. But in the end, I realized that Sarah's fiancé Mark was one individual who most definitely needed to know the truth. I had to make the painful choice to give him a call. I could hear Mark's bewilderment in his voice as he responded. He inquired as to what was happening, stating that I had vanished and wasn't answering anyone, and mentioning that Sarah had been in a horrible situation. I inhaled deeply before I started to tell him everything. I informed him about my original suspicions and how Tom and Sarah, among others, had dismissed them. I then went into great detail about what I had seen in my parents' garden. Mark absorbed all I said while listening silently and without interjecting. He just made a little noise to let me know he was still there. There was a lengthy, heavy stillness on the other end of the line when I eventually finished. Mark then expressed his gratitude to me for informing him in a calm, collected tone, adding that he needed some time to take it all in. He then hung up the phone. After learning the truth, I sat there looking at my phone in blank amazement, wondering what Mark would do. I didn't hear from him or the rest of my family again. As the wedding day drew near, I started to assume that Sarah had somehow persuaded Mark to forgive her, since she had stopped attempting to get in touch with me. It physically sickened me to think that she may actually get away with her crimes, that she might have her dream wedding, while my life was in ruins. I came to the realization that I couldn't go to the wedding. Knowing what Sarah had done, the thought of seeing her go down the aisle was unbearable. Rather, I chose to spend that day alone myself, thinking about how to move on from such a deep betrayal and rebuild my life. My cousin Emma called me out of the blue the night of the wedding. "Oh my God," she exclaimed in a quiet voice that had an undeniable tone of urgency and excitement. "What just transpired will astound you." I was curious and perplexed, so I asked her what she meant. Emma immediately launched into her narrative, describing what had happened. At first, she explained, everything had appeared normal. Mark had been waiting for the ceremony to start at the altar, and Sarah had looked gorgeous in her wedding gown. However, Mark had suddenly come up and declared that he had something to say when the vows were timed. As Emma described the scene, my heart started to rush. Mark publicly announced that he was unable to carry out the wedding. "I can't marry someone who betrayed her own sister and ruined her life by getting involved with her boyfriend," he told the guests. Emma went on to describe how Mark's statements had made Sarah become absolutely white. Then, to the surprise of everybody, Mark went to face my parents, apologized, and said they needed to know the true reason I had cut off contact with them. Emma continued by saying that Sarah had begun to weep. The guests had begun muttering among themselves to try to make sense of the situation, and my parents had been left stunned and confused. Sarah was crying by herself at the altar as Mark left the church. It resembled a scene from a movie. Emma informed me, with a hint of incredulity still in her voice. "Everyone is stunned. Sarah is an emotional mess, but your parents are attempting to get the whole story out of her." Emma had just told me everything, and I sat there taking it all in. I had a range of feelings. Knowing that the truth had at last come to light gave one a sense of vindication. On the other hand, I couldn't help but be very saddened by the suffering and upheaval this had caused my family. Emma inquired softly, "Are you okay?" after seeing my quiet. "I don't know," I answered. To be honest, I never intended for it to wrap this way. I spoke with Emma for a little while longer before hanging up and sitting quietly trying to make things right, but at what cost? The facts were out. Sarah and I lost our friendship. After my breakup with Tom, my entire family was in disarray. I realized that while the truth was now unmistakable, it did not immediately make things right. For the first time since this whole process began, I felt a little relief, but there was still a long way to go before I could heal and restore trust. At least now I could start moving forward without the burden of unspoken realities holding me back in terms of what comes next. Though I am aware that I will ultimately have to face my family, I am unsure. I am now taking each day as it comes. If nothing else, this experience has taught me the importance of trusting my instincts and standing up for myself, even when others doubt me. To everyone who has supported me along the way, thank you. Remember that your words of support mean more to those in similar situations than you may ever imagine. Trust your instincts, and don't let anyone deceive you into doubting your own feelings. I appreciate you watching. Please click the notification bell if you haven't already in order to receive updates on additional startling real-life stories that are happening in your area. Story 5, simply put, he is a pushover. While collecting my savings, my wife told her family, "He's not going to do anything." They concurred. I said nothing. I simply grinned and walked away. She felt remorse 5 days later. Life has a way of taking you by surprise, even if I never imagined I'd be writing this. My daughter, Betrayal, first requested assistance with her iPad games on Tuesday. I was installing some educational applications on my wife Willow's iPad, which she had connected to Borealis for parental controls. When the notifications began to appear, I first disregarded them. Even though I'm not the kind to pry, I felt compelled to look after seeing my name. Willow, her sister Lucy, and their mother Aurora were all on the group chat, which was called Family Only. After a little scrolling up, I read something that made me feel nauseous and like a pushover. It was written by Willow. When I told him I needed $5,000 to plan the house remodeling, he didn't even ask. Lucy and Aurora posted laughing emoticons. "While you can, you should take more," Lucy said. "He is overly kind to himself." Recall how he declined that promotion, since it would require him to spend less time with his family. I sat there scrolling through months of identical messages, forgetting about Brian's game. My spouse and her relatives had been making fun of me, plotting how to gradually deplete our funds, and joking that I would never figure it out. They also made fun of my puppy dog eyes on a regular basis, every time Willow requested money. The worst thing? This was not mere rhetoric. When I launched our banking app, everything began to come together. Plans for the renovations never materialized. Lucy Willow's emergency loans had been transferring funds to a different account. The increasingly pricey work conferences. I discovered receipts for spa getaways and shopping excursions. "Dad, is there a problem?" I was brought back to reality by Brill's voice. I made an effort to grin and assisted her in her game, but my thoughts were racing. I had never seen this side of Willow in our 8 years of marriage. Or perhaps I had. And that night, I had decided to disregard the warning signs. I gave my pal Skylar a call. I showed him the screenshots I had taken when we first met at a quiet pub. He browsed through them, his expression growing gloomy. He slid my phone back and said, "Dude, this is messed up. How will you respond?" I sipped my drink slowly. "Not yet." Skylar's eyebrow went up. "Nothing. They believe I'm easily influenced. While I determine the precise depth of this, let them continue to think that." The days that followed were bizarre. I went to work, returned home, and greeted Willow with a kiss, while observing her tapping on her phone. She's probably laughing with her relatives about me. I see things that I previously didn't see. How she would become tight whenever I approached her phone. The manner in which she would call from the backyard. She took an unexpected interest in managing all of our documents. It grew worse yesterday. I heard Willow talking to Aurora on the phone. Lately, he has been working a lot. I can probably move some more money and he won't even notice. He should shortly receive his bonus. That would be useful for my business endeavor. She chuckled. And what will he do? Defend himself? At that moment, I longed to enter, should confront her, and ask for clarification. But I kept thinking about what Skylar had said in our most recent talk. Keep a record of everything. Wait till you have all the proof before telling them you're on them. So when she entered, I grinned. When she said we needed to talk about potential investment prospects, I nodded. I did my part. The dependable pushover, the trusting spouse. However, I scheduled a legal consultation for tomorrow a.m. I had trouble falling asleep last night. As I lay there, listening to Willow breathe steadily, I wondered how many nights she had dozed off while planning her next move. A picture of us both glowing and full of optimism from our wedding day stood next to our bed. I now question if she was calculating at the time. Willow gave me a farewell kiss this morning, declared her love for me, then sent Lucy a text. It's nearly too simple. I feel horrible sometimes. Then I recall that he will never defend himself. Isn't it somewhat his own fault? False. Foxes are said to be most dangerous when they are cornered. However, they never bring up the dog that observes silently, for the ideal opportunity to flash its fangs. Even a pushover has boundaries. Even if I am one. Willow as well. She's going to have to learn that lesson the hard way. In an hour, I'll be meeting with the lawyer. I have copies of everything of it. I was not meant to be aware of the credit card bills, bank statements, or texts. Because I choose to be compassionate, they believe that I am weak. Patients are mistaken for cowards. It's okay. Allow them to chuckle. Allow them to strategize. Give them the impression that they understand me completely. They will discover that underestimating the quiet ones can often be the largest mistake you can make after 5 days, when everything is in order, every paperwork is filed, and every account is tracked down. When things get going, I'll provide an update. They're true that I'm often a pushover, but they're mistaken about one thing. So for the time being, I need to concentrate on defending Brielle and myself. They won't like it at all, and I will definitely take action on this. Update. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who supported my last article. You were correct. I have to approach this cautiously and methodically. My lawyer's consultation was enlightening. Money isn't the only factor here. Spreading out the screenshots I brought, she said. Systematic financial abuse is what this is. She made it clear to me that Willow's actions were deliberate manipulation rather than simple betrayal. It has been an instructive 5 days. After 8 years of marriage, you believe you know someone? Knowing the truth, however, has made it seem as though Willow has changed entirely. The small acts that I once found charming now appear to be planned. When she asks for anything, she touches my arm. The way she always brings up money issues when I'm occupied with Brielle. Speaking of Brielle, yesterday she said something that chilled me to the bone. She questioned Daddy, why does Mommy's work friend come to see her when you're not home? When we were playing in the backyard, I spoke in an informal tone. Who's that pal, dear? She gets her coffee from the tall man. He has a ring similar to yours and your mother's. That afternoon, I purchased a modest security camera. Nothing overt. It's just one of those package-related doorbell cameras. When I installed it, Willow didn't even notice. She had gotten another $3,000 from our savings for her emergency fund, but she was too busy messaging Lucy about it. I was surprised at how quickly the camera paid off. I took a personal day today, even though I was scheduled to be at work. I saw a silver BMW come into our driveway using the app. One man left. The wedding band remained in plain sight for 2 hours. I've got it all on tape. Every doorway, every exit. It's not even the worst part, though. Aurora and Lucy joined us for supper last night. As they exchanged knowing glances over my meatloaf, I sat there pretending to be the unaware spouse. As is common these days, the topic of money came up. Aurora spooned more potatoes onto her dish and whispered, Colton, Willow informs me that you are considering funding her new company. As I responded, I closely observed Willow's expression. Oh, she hasn't yet provided any details. Lucy leaped in. You ought to view the blueprints. It will be incredible. She trailed off, looking at Willow, but the initial investment is steep. Honey, we can talk about it later. Willow patted my hand and spoke pleasantly. I always look out for our best interests, you know. They set up their little scheme because they thought they were so clever. However, I had already viewed Willow's laptop's business venture documents. There was no company. Simple schemes to move our funds into a different account that I was unable to access. They congregated in the kitchen after supper, believing Brielle and I were watching TV. The vent echoed with their voices. He still doesn't know, Willow chuckled. When Mom brought up the business, did you notice his expression? He's so well trained by you. Lucy gave a puppy-like snicker. Be sure that everything has been moved before you inform him of the divorce. Aurora said, I didn't raise you to settle for some pushover who can't even defend himself. Your sister and I did. As we watched Brielle's cartoon, my mind racing, I squeezed her more tightly. After clearing out our accounts, they intended to surprise me with divorce papers. All of a sudden, the timing made sense. Next month was when my yearly bonus was due. Willow and her friend were working late today in the BMW, definitely. A forensic accountant met with me. The numbers provide a compelling narrative. Credit cards I was unaware of, hidden accounts, and missing money. Everything is now painstakingly documented. I also hired a private investigator. Expensive, but worth it. Within 2 days, he had photos of Willow and her friend at various hotels. He also found something interesting. Her friend isn't just married. He's married to one of her biggest clients. Skylar thinks I should confront her now, but that would be premature. You've got enough evidence. He argued over drinks tonight. Why wait? Because tomorrow is the annual family dinner at Aurora's house. The whole family will be there. Lucy's husband, Aurora's new boyfriend, all the people who've been laughing at the pushover behind his back. I've arranged for some interesting documents to be delivered during dinner. Nothing dramatic, just copies of bank statements, hotel receipts, and some choice screenshots from that family group chat. One copy for each person at the table. They think I'm weak because I'm quiet. They mistake kindness for cowardice. Tomorrow, they'll learn that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch most carefully. The best part? Willow doesn't even realize that while she's been playing her game, I've already won every document, filed every account traced, every item of proof documented, and legally validated. I just have one more role to play the oblivious husband at a family dinner. Then we'll see who's really been the pushover all along. Update coming tomorrow night. And trust me, you won't want to miss this one. Update 2. I'm still processing everything that happened over dinner last night, but I promised an update. So here it is. The evening started regularly enough. Aurora's house was packed with the typical commotion of family reunions. Lucy's husband was tending the grill. Aurora's boyfriend was making cocktails, while Willow was assisting her mother in the kitchen. Brielle was living with Skylar's family. I'd organized that early, knowing how the night may go. I played my part flawlessly. The usual calm, nice Colton. I chuckled at Lucy's husband's jokes, complimented Aurora on her new curtains, and acted as though I didn't see their knowing glances. Willow appeared particularly loving, most likely because she believed she was going to carry out her grand scheme. During appetizers, she whispered nicely, "Honey, we ought to announce the business endeavor to everyone right now," I thought. Exactly on time. Aurora became alert. "No doubt, Colton, you will be ecstatic about this chance." The doorbell rang at that moment. "I'll get it," Lucy offered, but I was on my feet already. "No, let me. I think it's the surprise I planned." Their expressions of bewilderment were invaluable. Their script did not call for this. I came back with 6 manila envelopes, each with a name on it. I stated calmly, "Before we talk about any commercial endeavors, I believe that these records could be of interest to everyone." As they opened the envelopes, the room became quiet. As they became aware of what they were seeing, I saw a change in their expressions. Hotel receipts, bank statements, screenshots of the messages in their group chat, images of Willow and her companion, time-stamped, dated, recorded. Willow's expression became pale. "I can explain, Colton. Could you explain how you took $47,000 out of our savings?" Quietly, I asked. "Or even the credit cards that I was unaware of. Or maybe you want to explain the hotel meetings to your client's wife." Lucy attempted to leap in. "Clearly, there is a misunderstanding here, such as the misconception that you assisted Willow in creating false accounts." I looked at her spouse. "Were you aware of your wife's role in concealing stolen funds?" The room exploded. Lucy was being yelled at by her husband. Aurora was attempting to control the damage. Willow was sobbing because she had been caught, not because she was sorry. "You were not authorized to snoop on me." Willow yelled like if stealing from me was wrong. I remained low to make fun of me, your family, and cheating on me, as well as a married guy. "All you're doing is attempting to scare us." Aurora spoke, but her tone wavered. I took out my phone and listened to an audio of Aurora talking about how to conceal assets before to issuing divorce papers. The spouse of Lucy left. The boyfriend excused himself clumsily. "I've already chatted with his spouse," I informed Willow. "The evidence I have obtained is of great importance to her. Her attorney will contact you. Everything is damaged by you." Lucy spit. "No," I said. "Did you guys do that yourself?" I simply recorded it. I straightened my jacket and got to my feet. "The paperwork for the divorce has already been submitted. Don't stress over answering immediately. There will be a lot for your lawyers to go over. The report from the forensic accountants is really fascinating to read." Willow was able to speak at last. "How about Brielle? Are you referring to the daughter you intended to use as leverage? The one you talked about in your texts, assuming complete custody of?" "Those conversations will be of great interest to the custody evaluator." I glanced back as I made my way to the door. "Oh, and Willow, the company you wanted to talk about tonight. The one that required an investment of $50,000. I've given the authorities those forged documents. Fraud is a very serious crime. Nothing can be proven by you," Aurora yelled. I grinned. "I have evidence of everything. Every communication, every exchange, every encounter. When everyone was giggling about the pushover, I was constructing an impenetrable case. Before I left, Lucy was texting feverishly, most likely alerting her husband to the financial consequences. Willow was being scolded by Aurora for allowing this to occur. Willow simply sat there, understanding at last that her flawless plan had failed. When I woke up this morning, there were more than 100 messages and 47 missed calls. It seems that Willow's friend is not overly pleased that his wife has discovered that Lucy's husband is discussing a divorce. After deciding that the drama wasn't worth it, Aurora's boyfriend departed. An hour ago, my attorney gave me a call. Willow's position isn't great, but she's trying to play hardball. The speed at which people turn on one another when caught is astounding. In return for leniency, Lucy has already offered to testify about the financial fraud. Today, I took Brian to the park. "Why didn't Mommy come home last night?" she asked. I simply informed her that adults occasionally require time to reflect on their errors. She appeared to acknowledge that the upcoming months would be difficult. However, I'm prepared. My kindness led them to believe that I was weak. I chose peace, so they thought I was a pushover. They never understood that being loud or aggressive isn't a sign of true strength. It all comes down to patience and strategy. We begin the legal process tomorrow. Willow's pal is dealing with his own issue. Lucy may be charged with fraud in Aurora. She's coming to understand that decisions have repercussions. After everything is done, I'll provide an update. But I have to concentrate on Betrayal for the time being. The most important thing in all of this is her. This pushover has teeth, it turns out. The last update. That supper at Aurora's house was 6 months ago. Many of you have requested an update, and I can finally tell you how things turned out now that the dust is cleared. Let's begin with Willow's companion. He wasn't just divorced by his wife. Half of his company was hers. After learning about the affair, she remained calm. She received retribution. She made calls to all of their significant clients, including some of their close friends. His reputation was in ruins by the time she finished. According to what I've heard, he drives for a ride-sharing firm and lives in a studio apartment. Willow's situation was not much better. Do you recall the fictitious business paperwork they intended to use to obtain my investment? Before 3 other guys came forward with identical tales, it became out that they had already pulled that fraud. That trend piqued the eye of the authorities. Willow is being charged with grand theft and fraud. While an inquiry was conducted, her license was suspended. Working with someone who defrauded their own husband is not something anyone wants to do. Lucy's life fell apart in a dramatic way. Her spouse didn't simply walk out. When he learned that she had been assisting Willow in hiding money for years, he lost it. He had their money examined by a forensic accountant of his own, discovered that she had also been stealing from his business. She is being charged with a crime. Her spouse ensured that everyone in their social circle understood the reason. By arguing that she was only helping her girls, Aurora attempted to play the victim. When the investigators discovered emails proving she was the brains behind many of their scams, that lie came crashing down. She had previously assisted her daughters in pursuing guys she believed to be weak. When her partner learned he would be the next to go, he fled. The divorce process moved along really quickly. I documented everything, and Willow's attempts to portray me as domineering failed miserably. Their group chat comments ridiculing me while attempting to steal my money caught the judge's attention in particular. There's nothing like penning a conspiracy to expedite a divorce. This is where things become fascinating, though. Do you recall that I was always referred to as a pushover? They underestimated me because of the same patience and attention to detail. I was able to create a strong case because to it, money trails dating back years were discovered by the forensic accountant. Every transaction, secret account, and fake paper is painstakingly recorded. It wasn't even a struggle for custody. Those messages about applying leverage to Brill, the ones in which Willow talked of severing my bond with our daughter, in family court, they performed poorly. Willow and I were granted primary custody, with supervised visits. Their social circle disintegrated when she wasn't occupied with her legal issues. It turns out that individuals dislike being discovered to have had a friendship with a criminal. When Willow's high-class pals discovered she had been lying about everything, they vanished. It seems that Lucy's membership at the country club was canceled. Charges of fraud are against their code of conduct. Aurora was asked to resign from her leadership positions by her church. For them, the financial fallout was severe. The court mandated fines in addition to the complete return of the stolen money. They frozen Willow's secret accounts. Lucy's possessions were confiscated. In order to pay for her daughter's legal bills, Aurora's retirement fund suffered a significant loss. I ran into Willow in the grocery store last week. She was purchasing generic brands using a prepaid card. Brielle saw her despite her best efforts to evade me. She turned to face me after saying, "Hello, Mommy. Can we have some ice cream, Daddy?" Willow's expression as I took out my wallet. It was priceless. The same one Mom used to make fun of me for being frugal with money. Even more so when Brielle joyfully talked about her new private school and our recent vacation. Lucy's hubby gave me a call yesterday. Evidence of similar plots dating back to their undergraduate years has been discovered by him. They sought to ruin the lives of other men they targeted. He's handing it all over to the police. The inquiry is growing. Aurora begged me to be reasonable and dismiss the accusations in a letter, said that I was ruining her family. In one note, she urged her daughters to steal from me, and I returned copies of all those messages. There are repercussions for actions. I was questioned by Skylar if I felt horrible about the outcome. I don't. They made their own decisions. All I did was make sure they couldn't avoid the repercussions. They believed that silence was a sign of weakness. They never understood how the silent ones watch everything, retain everything, and know when to attack. I relocated to a new home in a better school district with Brielle. She's doing well, making friends, and processing things with the help of a counselor. She questioned why some individuals do horrible things last night. I informed her that how we choose to react is more important than what other people do to us. The ultimate irony is that I would have assisted them if they had simply been truthful. I would have helped Willow's real company if she needed money. I would have helped Lucy if she was having trouble. They lost everything instead because they opted for avarice and derision. Karma occasionally requires a little assistance. They pretended I was too helpless to defend myself while they played their game. They were unaware that I was playing a longer game, one in which documentation and patience are easy lies and quick grabs. So here we are, facing societal disintegration and criminal prosecution. In our new house, my daughter and I are enjoying supper. The pushover they made fun of turned out to be stronger than they thought. Keep in mind that not all strength roars. It simply makes notes, constructs a case, and waits for the right opportunity to bare its teeth. My last update will be this one. I have to live a new life with Brielle, and it doesn't include lingering on the past. I appreciate all of your help, Reddit. Sometimes it makes all the difference to know that people